Right. I think we are at the top of the hour. And I'd like to welcome you all. Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the second day of the Samvera Connect 2021. We're so happy you're joining us today. My name is Ilkay Holt, and I'll be helping you today for navigating through the program, panels, and all the talks. Before we start, actually, I will just go through some housekeeping notes for you. Please note that this event has live closed captioning available. Simply just click on the closed captioning button at the bottom of the Zoom window. The conference is being recorded. We will have videos available on the Samvera YouTube channel, and slides will be made available in the Samvera Community repository. Attendees will receive links to both in the days after the event. We have question and answers function for your questions. We have a Slack channel available for conversations and any comments. Please do use Slack channels. If you need access to the Samvera Slack workspace, there is a link on the sked where you can request access. So today's session will run for 3 hours with 2 10-minute breaks. In the interest of maintaining a safe and supportive environment for all Samverans participating in today's event, we will read the Code of Conduct and the anti-harassment policy at the start of each day as a gentle reminder of how we work together and care for one another. Samvera's Code of Conduct lays out our shared expectations for respectful communication. The Samvera community is dedicated to providing a welcoming and positive experience for all its members, whether they are at a formal gathering, in a social setting, or taking part in activities online. The Samvera community welcomes participation from people all over the world, and these community members bring with them a wide variety of professional, personal, and social backgrounds. Whatever these may be, we treat colleagues with dignity and respect. Community members communicate primarily in English, though for many of them, this is not their native language. We therefore strive to express ourselves simply and remember that unnecessary use of jargon and slang will be a barrier to understand for many of our colleagues. We are sensitive to the fact that the international nature of community means that we span many different social forms around language and behavior, and we strive to conduct ourselves online and in person in ways that are unlikely to cause offense. Samvera conversations are often information-rich and intended to generate discussion and debate. We discuss ideas from a standpoint of mutual respect and reasoned argument. The companion piece to the Code of Conduct is Samvera's anti-harassment policy. It reads as follows. The Samvera community does not tolerate harassment in any form. Sexual or discriminatory language and imagery is not appropriate for any event venue, including talks or any community channels such as Slack-based chat rooms or mailing lists. Harassment includes offensive verbal comments related to sex, gender, ethnicity, nationality, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, body size, age, race, or religion, sexual or discriminatory images in public spaces, deliberate intimidation, stalking, harassing photography or recording, sustained disruption of talks or other events, inappropriate physical contact, and unwelcome sexual attention. Participants asked to stop any harassing behavior are expected to comply immediately. We expect participants to follow the Code of Conduct and the anti-harassment policy at all meeting venues, meeting-related social events, community gatherings, and online communication channels. Participating violating the Code of Conduct or anti-harassment policy may be sanctioned or expelled at the discretion of the Incident Response Team in accordance with the Samvera Code of Conduct Incident Response Manual. You get a link to these 2 written policies at any time by either going to the channel description at the top of the Connect Slack channel or by typing the phrase getCOC, that is GET space COC, into any channel in Samvera Slack. On the slide, you see the helpers for today. Please do not hesitate to contact them via this given channels. And if you are new to the community, there is probably a lot going on that may seem unfamiliar or unclear. It is okay to feel a little lost or out of place. Most of us did at first. Many of us have found the best way to get over our initial discomfort is to jumping in by asking questions and or volunteering to help. We are an agile community working to make things better as we go, and that means everyone is qualified to help. There are no imposters here. Most of all, we want everyone to have fun, learn new things, and move somewhere forward. Now, to start our programming today, I'm going to hand over to John Cameron, who will begin our technology updates with the update on Avalon. Let me just stop my share screening for you to start, John.
Okay. Let's see. Go. Okay, hi. I'm John Cameron from Indiana University Libraries, and today I'm going to be giving the Avalon update for this year. So the quick and very brief introduction to Avalon is that it is a Samvera solution bundle looking toward audio and video access, meant to be an easy way for libraries and archives to get their material up and streaming. It was jointly developed by IU and Northwestern for a very long time, and now it's just developed by IU. It's been supported by grants for a long amount of the project life, and our current version is 7.2.1. So the Avalon team here is me and a lot of other hardworking people. What I really want to point out here for the Avalon team is our new lead developer, Michael Johnson. I think maybe a lot of you have already met him, but if you see him around one of our Samvera things, please say hello. The other new person on the Avalon team is Chris Colvard, who actually returns back to the Avalon team, but in our DevOps role. And so he just rejoined the team, I think a couple of months ago. And so we have, some new people to fill those vacancies that we had for a while. But before I move on to other stuff, I want to celebrate Maria Whitaker, who I think is a well-known face in the Samvera community and who is retiring at the end of this month. I just want to say thank you, Maria. Maria and I started at the IU libraries around the same time, and we've spent a lot of time working on Avalon together. So I want to say thank you for all the time that you've put into this project. I think Maria may still be around working on a few other things, but not on the Avalon team. So thank you, Maria, for everything you've done and for being such a good person to work with and someone who I respect. So the Avalon community, we actually have 21 institutions in production right now, and 2 that are preparing for production use. So these are really great numbers. It's more than I had thought. This data comes to us by way of the user survey. So I know that there are a lot of people out there who completed this for us. Thank you. It helped us get a better idea of the whole Avalon community and be able to say, we have this many people who are out there using Avalon. And then our other sort of big community thing is the Avalon Roundtable, which is each month on the second Monday of the month at 1 p.m. It's pretty informal, but every time we meet, no matter who's there, we end up having some pretty good discussion about, implementations or just digital library stuff in general. And so it's been really great. So anyone, it's really no pressure, even if you're just interested in talking about something, AV related or a project you're working on, please join me for that. So the past year in Avalon releases has been fairly quiet for us. 7.2 was the big release late last year. And then 7.2.1 is the release this year that was, sort of dependency upgrades and for Rails, the My Magic fix that everyone was impacted by. But 7.2 had a lot of different stuff, such as the intermediate pages, supplemental file support, ability to do more editing on the object levels like merging, and then a lot of other fixes. But the other thing is our IIIF player. So Dhananji gave a great presentation yesterday, but the React IIIF player and Avalon has seen 2 releases just this year, one very recently this month, and then the 1.1 release that was earlier in the year. And so this is, an active thing in development, this IIIF based player that we're working on. We also have a session later at 2:40. So slightly after the conference, where we'll be doing a Q&A, and Dhananji and I and Maria will be there to talk with you about transcripts and the IIIF player. So please join us for that as well. We'd love to hear what people have to say from the community. So the next release that we're planning here is Avalon 7.3, which we've been working on for a while. And so this is the one that has the transcript component of the React IIIF player, which will be able to appear on the page to give, in item page rendering of transcripts. There's also things for analytics updates, support for Google Drive and Browse Everything, which is very cool, and many other sort of minor fixes that have accumulated just over the past year of, running the app. So Avalon 7.3, so again, that improved analytics is mostly geared for an extra data layer that can be used for Google Tag Manager or Matomo, so basically giving that extra semantic information. And then we also did Open Graph, so you can drop a link from an Avalon instance and have a nice card appear or other sort of that supplemental information. So yeah, I want to take a look at these screenshots for our Google Drive support. So this basically adds Google Drive as a source in Browse Everything. So once you click that little connect to Google Drive button, it pops open with an OAuth prompt. And after that, the user will see, like you see on the right here, Google Drive, and then everything within Google Drive. And then users can, of course, select media files. And basically it'll go fetch it from cloud storage and run it through Avalon. And this is really cool. It's very very functional, and I'm excited to get this out to our production instance. So looking forward, we still want to pursue a hierarchy-based Avalon, and our planning is going to restart after the upcoming Avalon release. And we get all the stuff that we've been working on for, transcripts, supplemental, Google Drive, all that stuff. And then sort of looking at the previous gap analysis that we've done, now that we have some more stuff ready, we're kind of like ready to go back and try tackling this again, just sort of reevaluating the work that we had done before. And, currently what's going on in Hyrax, upgrading our existing Avalon bundle, Hyrax-based solution bundle that's in Samvera Labs, and sort of going from there. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, John. So who is taking next, Julie or Karen?
I believe I can go next if that's okay.
Go, Julie.
All righty. Hi. Let me share my screen. All right. Is that visible? I think we're okay.
Yes.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Hardesty. I'm a metadata analyst at Indiana University, and my pronouns are she, her. And I am the Hyrax product owner. So I'll be giving the Hyrax update today. Oh, and of course, there we go. I also want to acknowledge that Indiana University Bloomington sits on the ancestral homelands of the Miami, Delaware, Potawatomi, and Shawnee people. There isn't a campus-wide land acknowledgement statement from Indiana University. Instead, the Indiana University First Nations Educational and Cultural Center encourages offices and individuals to create a statement that connects yourself and your work to the communities you're acknowledging. The Samvera community works hard to be an inclusive open source community that provides a welcoming and positive experience for all of its members. And our Samvera community efforts at dignity and belonging align with the efforts to repair and restore dignity, belonging, and justice to those Indigenous communities who have been pushed out and denied those very things. As a product owner and participant in Samvera, I am interested in talking with anyone in the Samvera community about how our work can better serve Indigenous communities who are using Samvera technology or who are served by institutions using Samvera technology. So keeping that in mind, I'll now share updates on Hyrax, one of the main software development efforts we have in our community. Hyrax is a Ruby on Rails engine built by the Samvera community. It provides a foundation for creating many different digital repository applications. As a Rails engine, Hyrax is not by itself a web application. To build your digital repository using Hyrax, you must mount the Hyrax engine within a Rails application. So we call an application that mounts Hyrax a Hyrax-based application, or sometimes a Hyrax application. So you'll hear that sort of terminology when we talk about Hyrax. This is an example of a Hyrax-based application, and you can visit this and try it out yourself. This is Nuraxdev, which is a demonstration site we use for testing code changes and issue reports regarding Hyrax. It's pretty close to what you get when running Hyrax in a Rails application without any customizations. Data Curation Experts, a DCE, is the host for this site, and I want to thank them for this contribution to the community. We have the Hyrax Maintenance Working Group that works on a 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off sprint cycle to support maintenance and development of Hyrax by addressing issues from the GitHub backlog and reviewing and merging pull requests. So the working group for the July to December cycle is listed here. And I will be saying more about these wonderful people in a couple of slides, so we'll get back to them. So the latest happenings for this work cycle include the release of Hyrax 3.1.0, which is the latest in the Hyrax 3.x releases. And it's including query optimizations, fixes for some longstanding bugs, new rake task for regenerating file derivatives in bulk, more Valkyrie work, and the Valkyrie work has kind of been the big push for 3.x releases. And in addition, deployment improvements for container images, Helm charts, and the internal test app, which is called DASI. And DASI is another name for Hyrax, the cute little animal you keep seeing on the screen here. So we also have a release for the Hyrax 2.x series in this work cycle, and that's Hyrax 2.9.6. And that is a pretty specific release that's updating to Active Fedora 12.2. With regarding the issues, outstanding issues that we have and work that's been happening on Hyrax, there are more issues that exist now than I reported on at Samvera Virtual Connect in the spring. So new things have been reported and opened, but also the Hyrax Maintenance Working Group in combination with community members have closed 53 Hyrax issues since May. So there's just been a lot of activity in general. Overall, we're still seeing bugs going down, including those for 3.x. We have priority issues which are also being cleared, and we're also chipping away at accessibility concerns and documentation needs. And I am happy to say that we still have no blocker issues that have come up that haven't been resolvable pretty quickly. So that's been fantastic. Okay, now I think the biggest development for Hyrax this working cycle is that Tamsin Johnson from UC Santa Barbara has stepped down as Hyrax tech lead. And that's been effective since the end of September. They are no longer serving on the Hyrax Maintenance Working Group or participating in the working group sprints. So I made this little Hyrax marquee to say thank you to Tamsin for their fantastic work and contributions as Hyrax tech lead over the last few years. I am glad you are still with the community and working on Hyrax, Tamsin. And thank you for the support you've shown me coming into the role as Hyrax product owner. There is no one in the Hyrax tech lead role at this point, and we are continuing through the rest of this work cycle that way, which means our capacity for maintenance work is lower. But at this point, I do want to thank Daniel Pierce from Indiana University for serving as a developer on the maintenance working group and working on code changes for issues in this cycle. And also thank you to Rebecca Cotti from UNC Chapel Hill, Crystal Richardson from Notch 8, and Beth Sadler from Princeton University for working on issue testing, developing documentation, and testing issue fixes for this cycle. All of that is keeping our work moving forward. And also a thank you to Jessica Hilt from UC San Diego for scheduling us and bringing us all together. It would be very difficult to do this without having the calendar reminders and having the organization. We're making adjustments based on all of this for the remainder of this cycle in 2021. We're still working on open issues as we can that require developer work or quality assurance testing work for issue fixes and documentation updates. So many of the issues added recently have been concerned with Valkyrie work on Hyrax. That's where a lot of the new issues have come from. And the Hyrax Maintenance Working Group is helping with work that is taking shape here to complete the changes necessary so that a Hyrax-based application can run with a backend that does not have to be Fedora 4. This project has been called Valkyrie, or Hyrax on Wings, if you've heard those terms being tossed around. Lynette Rail from Cornell University and Tamsin Johnson from UC Santa Barbara have been gathering energy around finishing this Valkyrie work, and the Hyrax Maintenance Working Group will be helping by testing a deployed Hyrax-based application using the release testing script that we have for Hyrax. And that will allow us to check that all of the basic Hyrax functionalities are still available when Hyrax is connecting to a backend that is not Fedora 4. This initial testing will be with Hyrax running against PostgreSQL as the backend. But once we establish that this is functional, Fedora 6 will be the next backend to test. I know there is a Fedora 6 adapter available, and we will need a Fedora 6 instance to connect to this deployed Hyrax application for testing. This work is happening right now and into November at least, and probably continuing on from there as well. So if you're interested in helping to move all of this forward, you can contact Lynette or Tamsin or me. There's testing, there's development tasks, there's figuring out a way to test Fedora 6, and that you can use your help for that. In addition to that work, we're also working on updating documentation, and Beth Sadler's joining with Rebecca and Crystal as quality assurance GitHub issue tester work as time allows this cycle to work on documentation updates specific to the Samvera knowledge base at samvera.github.io. So we've been doing some updates there, and I think there'll be some more. You'll start seeing Hyrax 3.x documentation showing up there. Additionally, we've been working on what we're calling code reclamation, and that's when there are issues that we're seeing where an institution has reported that they have worked on this locally, or potentially they have a fix or are interested in a fix for this for local concerns. We are contacting those institutions and asking if they have anything that could be contributed back to the Hyrax code base. And that's actually worked a couple of times so far. So I think this is, and we've managed to close an issue or two doing that. So I think this might be a path that we try to take moving forward more to see if we can target and get some specific issues fixed that way. So, and then finally, the 2022 Samvera Maintenance Pledge Drive is happening right now. And that is where you can commit a specific set of hours during 2022 to contribute to code maintenance. And if you are interested in participating, you or your institution can pledge hours towards maintenance technical work for 2022. So this isn't just for Hyrax. The pledge program is to help out with Haiku, Avalon, core components, as well as Hyrax, any sort of Samvera technical work that we have happening. So there are programming needs, there are documentation needs. Sorry, there are cat needs. Oof. There are testing needs. There are DevOps needs for packaging and deploying code. There's sysadmin needs for supporting demo sites. So it really is a buffet of opportunities, and however you participate in the Samvera community, we can use your help with this pledge drive. The work of the Hyrax Maintenance Working Group will continue next year, and it's going to be shaped by the pledges we receive. So any and all of these needs that we have listed here will benefit the tasks we have to maintain Hyrax and keep it in shape for our community to use. But wait, there's more. So I know this is going to be hard for some folks to resist, which is exactly why we're doing it. But we're working on a special edition collectible hex sticker. Yeah, for those who pledge maintenance hours for Hyrax work. So you can tag your pledge for Hyrax work, and that hex sticker will be coming to you. So make your pledge today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julie, for wonderful news from Hyrax. Kevin, it's over to you now.
You're muted,
You're
Kevin.
on mute. Yeah.
Thank you. Just getting my camera together. Thank you, Julie. I need to get a cat because that was just too adorable. Let me. And hopefully you're seeing the whole slideshow as soon as it loads. Does that look good?
Yes.
Great. Well, good morning from the West Coast. I'm here to give the Haiku update as part of the tech updates. And I have the wrong day on that. Very quickly, just because there's always some newcomers here, a quick introduction to what is Haiku. Most of you probably know this at this point, but we have the Samvera components, and Julie just explained how Hyrax creates a Rails application, sits on a Rails application. Haiku takes that and turns it into a little bit more of a turnkey bundle. So if you deploy a Haiku application, you have a lot of fully featured elements for your repository right out of the box. Some things that Haiku and Hyrax both have are common elements: robust faceted search and browse, ability to submit new items and leases and embargoes. And then some things that are unique to Haiku are multi-tenancy, which we talk about a lot. That's the ability for a lot of discrete repositories in one instance of the software. There are some additional pre-built work types, pre-installed bulk import export, more out-of-the-box theming options, and some other things with Haiku. General updates on Haiku today, going on in the community-wise. The Haiku interest group meets once a month, the last Thursday of each month. A little more information on that later. We get pilot updates from the active projects in the community. Right now, that tends to be Pawnee Policy's Haiku for Consortia, the Advancing Haiku Project, British Library, University of Louisville, Washington University, and the Adventist Digital Library. We talk about the roadmap. So it's an opportunity for us to align about features and make sure that other projects know what's coming down the pipeline. And we give release updates and technical updates from our new monthly Haiku developers call. And it's a great place to welcome newcomers. Some people come and don't say anything, they just listen. And like everything in this community, we're very welcoming. So you shouldn't be afraid to come and ask questions. Haiku 3.02 is the current release. We had some new features in 3.0, including DOI minting, cross-tenant search is coming. Theming updates from Haiku for Consortia are now in Haiku. That includes the 3 templates that you can choose from the admin side. You don't need a developer to deploy them. So you've got a cultural repository theme, a institutional repository, and a new neutral one. Those give all different UIs instead of just the out-of-the-box Haiku experience. Orcid Integration is also down, and we just saw a preview of that yesterday from Elisa Barrett and Paul Daniele at Ubiquity as part of our lightning talk. So that was a great preview. Our Haiku roadmap can be found at this link, and our developer calls occur once a month. The second Thursday of each month. And that's something that we've started just the past few months and has given the more technical developer side a chance to collaborate a little bit more and get aligned on some technical troubleshooting and other features that they can bring to Haiku. The next release plan will be 4.0. There'll be deployment updates here. So we've overhauled the way that local development and deployment is done and improved some settings and environment variables to better align with Hyrax. Bulk racks is the bulk import export gem that's attached to Haiku, and that has some ongoing work right now. Notchade is working with GBH, as well as University of California, Santa Cruz, and soon University of Louisville. And each time we work with a new client and a new project, it just makes the tool even more robust. It's an easy to use interface that you're able to edit, create, run, and delete and rerun imports of bulk. And there's always new formats that it's compatible with, including those on this list. A couple major grant projects around Haiku that we hear a bit about in the community. So I'll highlight those here. The Advancing Haiku project is a collaboration between the Arcadia Charitable Fund, British Library, University of Virginia, and Ubiquity Press. And just some high-level updates because they'll be talking a little bit later today in a panel. But there's continued progress on the shared search layer and auto-population of content. They update their blog regularly about code contributions. So there's a link at advancinghaiku.io. They have been the leaders in consolidating our roadmap board. We use their model, and I really thank Ilkay, Holt for introducing that and bringing that to us. But now if you go to the Haiku project board, you'll see everything that's kind of in the pipeline across all the major Haiku projects. And that's improved visibility, collaboration, and stewardship. And additionally, the advent of those Haiku developer calls has helped advance that. Another grant project is Haiku for Consortia with Palni and Palsy and Notch8. Palni and Palsy is a multi-tenant platform for production use and piloting across 4 different library consortia. Currently, there are 10 tenants in production and 14 in a pilot or test mode. We've recently implemented theme templates, updates to groups and permissions, and new work types for OER and ETD. They are just finishing out an IMLS grant phase, the initial one, and they have been awarded a new 2-year IMLS grant, Haiku for Consortia, Removing Barriers to Adoption. Again, you'll hear from them a little later today in the panel, but high level preview there is that that'll be 2 years of work organized around generous user testing and feedback with research, review, and analysis in order to create the requirements for the work that will go into that grant. Their goal is to develop a toolkit for consortial collaboration around repositories. During the initial research phases of the grant, and they're doing some small projects with Notch8 currently for some UI enhancements and other tweaks. They've begun a regular schedule of data benchmarking and user satisfaction surveys in order to inform that grant. And I mentioned a little earlier, those theming templates are out. So here's just a quick visual of what that standard Haiku homepage can turn into with just a few tweaks in the admin dashboard. Other projects in development, and we hear about these monthly in the Haiku interest group call. We've got University of Louisville, who is working on their own Haiku application for cultural heritage content. Currently, their progress is that they've completed setup of work types, metadata, search, and record display. They're progressing with upload of heterogeneous primary resource materials, which are exported from Content DM onto their Haiku production server. They're beginning work on enhancing front-end design and uploading complex compound objects. And they're in the planning phase of designing a user assessment focus group. Ubiquity Press is working on some things themselves. They're continuing to integrate other Ubiquity products with their Haiku platform. They offer the Ubiquity repository service. Migrations with them are underway from several platforms, including bpress, tspace, and SobXCM. And they've developed 2 big Haiku features recently through advancing Haiku, the Orcid integration that we've mentioned, and the cross-tenant search. Notch8 is now working with British Library and CoSector of the University of London on the shared research repository. They've moved from their initial Haiku application to a new one. At this point, it's a shared repository of now 7 separate tenant repos. And it features the use of bulk racks for bulk import and export, which is new to their application. The new application is live at iro.bl.uk, but there is additional work on application parity to get it to where they want it to be and where it previously was. So auto population of content from DOI is in progress. Data site integration for DOI creation is coming across the line, and the cross-tenant search is the next big thing that we'll be seeing in the repository. The Adventist Digital Library is a project with Andrews University and Notch8, providing access to Seventh-day Adventist historical and theological materials. That's a collaborative repository across Andrews University and some other colleges. They're migrating from an Islandora application, undergoing migration work now as the application is up. It's dual tenant, so it takes advantage of the multi-tenancy in Haiku. And we're preparing for some additional work before it goes live and ready for the public. Notch8 is finishing out work with the Newman Numismatic portal. Some new work to that has included book reader for searchable, flippable PDFs and refining OCR and content ingest workflow. This is an application for Numismatic special collection with Washington University of St. Louis. And highlighting hosted Haiku service solutions, Ubiquity has UPress at haiku-repo.io, and you can learn about Notch8's Haiku Up at haikuup.com. I know both Ubiquity and Notch8 are happy to give demos and set up new repositories for people to take a look at and have some exploratory phone calls. So that's my update. Thanks for listening. Please follow Haiku. Haiku.samvera.org is our informational site. I think it's having some technical issues right now, but stay tuned. I try to update that once in a while with presentations. But another great place to find Haiku work is on the Haiku YouTube channel, which I don't have a link to here for some reason, but should be easy to find if you look up Samvera Haiku YouTube. On Samvera Slack, we've got our own Haiku channel. So it's a great place for newcomers to ask questions and get some technical troubleshooting help. We do have our own Haiku Google group for important updates if you want to link in there. And you're welcome to join the interest group the last Thursday of each month. There's call-in information here. It's also on the Samvera wiki if you need to find it. And that developer call for the technically minded folks is the second Thursday of each month at 9 o'clock Pacific. Want to thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out at any time. Thanks, okay.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Before I hand over to for our last update, there is one question in our Slack channel, just in consideration of not many people or someone actually doesn't follow that. There's already also a bunch of responses, but Jonathan Rochkin was asking, are all Haiku deploys currently considered pilots? Curious about the use of the term pilots. Again, Chris, Bertie, and Gretchen already provided some answers in terms of in production deployments, but if you want to add anything to that.
No, and I'm looking at Gretchen's response quickly, and that's honestly exactly what I would say. We've been a little fast and loose with the term pilot, I think, because we still feel like Haiku is something that we're proving to the world, and we're happy to see some production instances now, like Haiku for Consortia, that maybe we need to just evaluate the use of that word a little more strongly. But when we come as a group to discuss updates, we consider them pilots because they're all bringing something new to the table.
Thanks, Kevin. So Trey, floor is yours.
Great, thank you. See that okay?
Yes.
Great. Hi, everybody. I am Trey Pendragon. I work for Princeton, and important for this presentation, I'm the technical lead for Valkyrie. So here's what we're going to do. Valkyrie is a pretty small library, so I get to do things like spend a long time telling you what it is and why it exists. And then I will talk about what happened this year, and then what we're going to do next and how you might be able to help. So what is Valkyrie? I was a lot more poetic last year, but to be more succinct, it's a Ruby gem that lets you save to multiple backends in the same code base with the same API. Right now, it lets you save to Postgres, to Fedora 4, 5, and 6 in memory, as well as Solr. And it lets you save bits in Fedora 4, 5, and 6 on disk. And there are plugins to let you save anywhere that Shrine will let you save, which is usually like S3 or Google Cloud or various other things like that. Why might you care what Valkyrie is? Again, much more poetic last year, but it's feeling like a more concrete sort of year to me. It's the only Ruby library right now that lets you save resources to Fedora 5 and 6 in a way that you can like look at the properties in a reasonable Ruby looking way. So if you're interested in Fedora 5 and 6, Fedora 5 maybe for stability or Fedora 6 for OCFL, this is kind of the way. Number two, Hyrax is using it right now and will shortly hopefully be able to save to a variety of adapters. Number three, and personally important to me, you get to use Postgres if you want. And number four, it helps you escape some awkward problems when using Active Fedora. I'm not going to go super far into this, but there has been in the past some like a few issues that after you use Active Fedora for long enough, you find are sort of hard to get around, which you just don't have to deal with here. Okay. So great, Trey. You've told me that I have to use this. So what is my code going to look like? On the left, this is a very old table and still looks the same. So on the left, you'll see sort of what it looks like in Active Fedora. And on the right, you'll see what it might look like in Valkyrie. The important piece here is that in Active Fedora, and it looks kind of like Active Record, you'll do a lot of like calling find on the class method or calling persistence on an instance of a thing. And it will sort of act the way that you expect it to act. The difference in Valkyrie is that you'll instead pass parameters to metadata adapters, and you'll kind of pass around this representation of your data, which we call a Valkyrie resource. That sort of flexibility of passing it to that adapter means that that adapter could be going anywhere, and it could in fact be persisting to multiple places at the same time, or a variety of other patterns that are only really enabled when you're not locking persistence with your metadata. I'm going to try to answer a few questions that I get a lot. If I were looking at that table and people have looked at that table before and said, that's quite a lot of typing, Trey. I agree. It is quite a lot of typing. It's much more verbose. I will say that more typing means that there's less abstraction. It's a little bit more flexible. And separating persistence from the record is the best way to let you migrate that record across data stores. One thing I hear a lot is, well, I have no intention of changing my data store. And I say that's likely true, but in repositories, we do persist to multiple places quite a lot. There's the primary data store, there's the index. We often have a preservation storage format, which you can represent as a Valkyrie adapter. And we have to do things often that are like, I want to upgrade from Fedora 4 to 5 to 6, for instance. And letting you have all of those data stores be persistable and representable in your application at the same time means that you can write code in your application to migrate between those in some flexible way. Number 3, there are people who have written record.find and save, which just pulls up like a default metadata adapter. You could totally do that. I think you'll regret it. If you have a genius idea about making this API look a little nicer, I'd be happy to talk about that sort of thing. All right, quick overview of the architecture, just so that you know kind of what you're getting into when you look at this kind of stuff. Every adapter has a metadata adapter with a query service. These are like canned queries that will give me resources back. And there's a persister, which I pass resources to and will save it to my data store. On the side are change sets, which sort of manage everything that is not, it's kind of not just built into a Valkyrie resource. These are things like dirty attribute tracking or things to make simple form work or validations. On the side are storage adapters, which lets you save bits to Fedora 4, 5, and 6 in the cloud and on disk as well as in memory. So I want to talk about a couple of questions I get pretty often. Some people say this looks a lot like Hanami or Ruby Object Mapper or stuff like that. I say that's definitely true. I've tried just using those libraries in the past and found that I was unable to map our use cases to those libraries. If somebody finds a way to do that and they like it a lot more, I would love to see that. I think that would be a great presentation and I'd be happy to talk about it. Another thing I get is if you're going to save to Postgres, why not just use Active Record? I I will say that the metadata adapter that saves to Postgres that ships with Valkyrie just uses active record. But why is there all this API layer? And I will say that there are institutions that need to support Fedora or need to support other arbitrary formats. And active Fedora's implementation was build an active record-esque library so that things look familiar. And it served us well for a long time, but it's pretty hard to maintain. So if that is hard to maintain, then how is Valkyrie going to be easier to maintain? And our way of moving towards that is to have these 4 principles. Make it easy to support your technology of choice, translated to it's easy to write a new adapter. Use the smallest amount of code you can. Use external dependencies with their own communities. So leverage code bases that are outside our own community. And make sure that if people are going to be building adapters or things like that, that we provide a set of specs that you can run programmatically to make sure that your adapter matches the same specifications as every other adapter. So we ship a suite of shared specs that you can easily run against your adapter, as well as the ones that you just include inside your app to make sure that they work. All right, so that is what happened, or that's sort of what it is. So what happened this year? We are sort of at the stage where we're fixing just weird edge cases and making things faster, which is a good stage to be at. So Solr indexing performance is significantly faster. We recently pushed write-only adapters. So sometimes, especially in the case of indexing, I just want to shove a representation inside a data store and I don't care about how it comes back out. So if I don't care about how it comes back out, then I don't have to map the Solr output to a Valkyrie resource. So all that code just doesn't happen. So it's faster. And then we fix some race conditions when you save a resource, you pull a resource out, some other process deletes it, and then your process finishes and it saves. Previously, it would have recreated that resource, and now it just won't happen. And everything except for Fedora, because Fedora was very nicely throwing a tombstone error. What's going to happen next? Valkyrie 3.0. There are some improvements to file handles management. There's some dependency updates. Draper will no longer be a dependency. And some old deprecations are going to get removed. I released this last night. So 3.0.0.beta1 is out now. Try it out. There should not be much that you have to do in order to get it to run. How you can help? I would say right now the biggest impact you can have is to reach out to the Hirax team to sort of work with them to complete the migration of Valkyrie. You can ask about it in Slack and Dev or even in the Connect channel. We're all very friendly. We accept any and all help, and we will help you get sort of acclimated. Yeah. I wanted to leave a quick thanks. These are all of the committers and issue creators that I was quickly able to find. And if you want to get a hold of us, the easiest place is we have a Slack channel named Valkyrie. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Trey. We have several comments in the Slack channel, but we also have a question in the Q&A. For the recording, if you like, I can just read that loud. Sure. Is there going to be a native backup restore module built into Hirax Valkyrie for data?
Oh, that's interesting. We don't have a ticket for that. If you're asking about if there's going to be like a way to preserve the combination of my data and my binary content, we have that in Princeton's repository, a sort of standard way to do that, but we haven't shipped that with the gem. If you're just asking, is there a standard way to ship between one data store and another data store, that is just pull it out of the query service of one adapter and put it into the persister of another one. There's not really any code to write.
Okay, Scott Kushner said thanks. Thank you, Trey.
Yeah, I can
First one.
answer other questions inside the channel. Assuming we're not, I don't know if we're at time. I don't know what the situation is here.
We still have time. There are, there are a couple of comments. If you'd like to go ahead, please do.
Let's see. So yes, Valkyrie does lean on Shrine. I want to expand that is a plugin. So in Samvera Labs, there's a Valkyrie Shrine plugin developed by some friends at Northwestern and now used in production for quite a while at Princeton. Somebody mentioned that Jonathan Rajkin mentioned that the proof will be whether we can actually migrate between different repositories. I will say at Princeton, we've done it once already. We migrated from using Active Record to, there's another metadata adapter that uses the SQL gem. And that was about as simple as possible. Is there an expectation that we oh, sorry, never mind. I think we're good.
As we still have time, I'd just like to repeat if there is any other question for our other speakers. I'm just watching the Slack and also Q&A. Okay. I don't see anything new, so I would like to thank you all in this technology update session. This has been great news from each technology, and we will come back. I know we are a bit early, right? And we will just, come back 20 past the hour. So I will just, share you can actually have some leg stretching time yourself, and I will just share my slide so that you can see when we are back. So thank you again. So we'll see you at the 20 past hour. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a chance to refresh your teas or coffees or stretch your legs. Before we start our next panel, I just wanted to mention that we have actually quite lively Slack channel at the moment, and Anna Headley also pointed out that some of our panelists on Zoom, they're not able to ask their questions in the Q&A, but when you post anything in the Slack channel, if you just can use a question as a prefix to ask your questions, then we will only pick up those questions instead of interfering any other chats or questions going on in the Slack channel. Hope that's okay, but also please feel free to use the Q&A still if you are able to ask any question in there, so we will watch for that. Our next panel is the Haiku project panel, and the title is In the Community and in the Wild. And so I will just invite Ellen to take over, because she will be managing or chairing this panel.
Thanks, Ilkay. Ilkay, you're going to share slides for our panel, right?
I will happily do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, this is our, I think, third time doing this panel together, and it really speaks well to the collaboration that we have had across Haiku projects, as Kevin indicated and as has been said a couple of times. So we're going to start off the panel talking about who is presenting today, and thanks, to the right place, who is presenting today and why, and what projects we are representing. And then we will go a little bit into collaboration, which Ilkay will lead, and then more on individual projects, which you've heard a little bit about today, but we hope to be able to answer specific questions. So I'm going to, again, I'm Ellen Ramsey from the University of Virginia. I'm the principal investigator for the Advancing Haiku project, which is a 2-year project funded by the Arcadia Charitable Trust, which is a service of Lisbeth Rousing. And I always get this wrong. Wait, I need to do it again. Do it again. Sorry, it is a charitable fund of Lisbeth Rousing and Peter Baldwin. And we will also have from the British Library, Jenny Basford, who's going to talk about that project implementation. And from the Pawnee-Poussey Haiku for Consortia / Haiku Commons, to go with what the Slack channel has been saying, project is Amanda Herford today. So to kick off very quickly, I'm going to turn it back over to Ilkay, and she's going to talk about collaboration across these 4 projects, because I think this is really the biggest takeaway, what we've seen. And go for it, Ilkay.
Thank you, Ellen. Yeah, only a few minutes. We thought we can start this session with talking about our community collaboration practices in advancing Haiku. That's why I will just take you through some of the examples and some of the lessons learned. First of all, we just wanted to just highlight, why question, why we are really underlining this, and what is the value actually in it, for us, for the advancing Haiku. Ultimate goal, apart from all the specific deliverables and objectives of the project, which Alan is going to do a little bit talk about. The ultimate goal, is for us, whatever we achieved and produced, within the advancing Haiku, is to give that back to the community. The other thing, we always try to do our best, to avoid, silos across the project. Also, try to avoid any redundancy work, or not, or avoid, duplicates, and also have a, unified, vision in terms of to be able to actually build upon each other's, project, the achievements and the successes. Some of these are, these things are a bit, obviously out there. It's like more people actually adopt these, technologies. They can actually build upon those technology, and then this is actually better for the community. And people can take it and use it, or whatever actually we didn't actually achieve, that also needs to be communicated and say something about the sustainability. Maybe more actually about that. I should also just underline that it just independent of the persons or institutions or in service providers, it just brings the sustainability into the projects. And also obviously we just learn from each other. We share our community experiences. This is also means that the efficiency in terms of using resources across the projects. So as I said, I will just try and highlight a few things, and then I will hand it over to Ellen. I'm not going to actually go into the details about this survey, but one of the first things that we did, we had an enormous list of features that we wanted to develop right at the beginning, early in the project. And at that point, we really wanted to ask the community what is most important for them, what to actually prioritize in terms of developing features, because obviously, we just, according to those, survey results, we did move some of the things, earlier in the project, and we just, delayed, some of the items. But this was quite an important milestone, at least in our projects, in terms of community collaboration. The second point, I don't know whether any of you actually used, but we did communicate this, within our Haiku community. Alongside with the survey, we did work on a number of user stories. Yesterday's storytelling session also reminded me this, to be able to spec anything, you obviously you do spend quite a lot of time on these user stories. We did put them out in the Advancing Haiku GitHub, all these user stories. So we are hoping that someone else can just pick those up and can use it for their own projects. The last one, I think Kevin very nicely also put this out there. This was something that we tried to initiate to show everyone that what Advancing Haiku is really working on, and what is the progress on those items in terms of the feature developments. And all these cards, all these new features are also linked to the user stories. If there is anything done, you see actually in this either local instances or in the Haiku code base. We also actually add the links to the codes for someone else to use. This is now being used actually across 5 projects. So we are so happy to this has been actually picked up and used quite heavily. So going back to Ellen after this slide.
Thanks, Ilkay. As you can tell from this presentation, there's lots and lots of handoffs among institutions in these projects, and I think that this is great evidence of that. So we wanted to highlight and remind folks about what the Advancing Haiku project has been. And so here's where we started. Hopefully this is old news to most people in this presentation, but if this is your first Samvera Connect and you are interested in why and what we are doing, this is a list of the original deliverables that we proposed and had funded for this project way back in October 2019, a different lifetime ago. We did get an extension on the project for 6 months because COVID. We are in the home stretch looking at the final 4 or so months of the project. So, okay, this is what we said we were going to do. And the question is, how far have we gotten? You can take a look very visually at this lovely update of a piece of the poster that we put in for, I think, open repositories. Ilkay did this one, and we updated it just this week for where we are on deliverables. WP stands for work package, for those who aren't familiar with that parlance. And as you can see, lots and lots of things are, really nearing completion or are complete. And you saw yesterday the demo from Ubiquity Press on Orcid IDs and author profile syncing, which we're all very excited about. Work we are currently working on at this moment is in-browser display. So, and we were, again, excited about the work that Avalon is doing on IIIF. So good community collaboration there. There's a possibility, but that's new to us. A couple of things that we need to wrap up or potentially, hand off. And again, the community user stories are super, super helpful for that. One of the things that we've seen is that the preservation pathways work that we initiated with AP Trust early in our project. There was some good demonstration of some bagging protocols that would work well. And actually, it turns out that there's a need for that work in a slightly different format in the Haiku for Consortia project. So we're partnering with AP Trust and they are partnering with Haiku for Consortia. So that's a very nice handoff of community work that we're looking at. And then the final piece of the project will be UVA sample migration to a hosted Haiku instance. So what have we done? Well, this is not, again, not news. You've seen this a couple of times in presentations across the community so far, but one thing I do want to highlight, a couple of things I want to highlight are the architecture review that was done by British Library early in our project. We are including that in our deliverables because it may impact the way that future projects approach Haiku architecture. And so if you haven't taken a look at it and you have interest in the infrastructure of the underlying code and platform, I do encourage you to do that. It's in an open repository there that happens to live at UVA. Just to highlight what Ilkay was talking about in terms of our community check-ins, we've done that and really, really appreciate the collaboration. And I think one thing that we're all really proud of is how well the community came together around Haiku 3 and what we were able to put into that from each project. And there's a long post on that. That was a collaboration of Chris Kolvard and Kevin Kuchansky and Ilkay and myself and probably the people that I'm forgetting that's up on the, and Heather Greer-Klein helped us put it up on the samvera.org blog. Finally, as you've heard a couple of times and Kevin mentioned in his Haiku overview, the options for hosted Haiku repository are expanding. And that's just a very, very different place than we were a couple of years ago when we started this project. Not due to us, but we've been part of that and we're very proud of it. All right, next slide. I'm going to turn it back to Ilkay for a moment so that we can talk about what we've learned from our project thus far. Actually, I think that one's mine.
Yeah, please go ahead for the first one. Yeah.
So as you've heard from all of us who are participating in this project, and I'm very proud of us for participating in Samvera Connect, working closely across projects, being open, being transparent has been really, really important. One of the things I think that's been a culture change within the Samvera community, or something that we've really learned to do better, is to be open about plans in advance. I know that sometimes that can feel very difficult when you're approaching funders to talk about what your plans are when you don't know the results of a proposal. But I think that we've done, that the community in general has done a much better job of that in recent years. And we are excited to continue along that trend. Otherwise, I think what we found at the beginning of this collaboration across Haiku projects is we all had gotten funded for things that we couldn't quite tease out how they were different, and they are different, but it took us a little while to figure that out. And once we did, we've been much better about transparency and collaboration. I'm gonna turn the next couple over to Ilkay.
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, for this, second and the third point, I wanted to just underline, especially with layers of communications. We found very useful to have conversations between the project leads and the repo managers to develop, across projects within the Haiku to develop ideas, improve user stories and define specs. And in the same way, our developers actually needed to take focused conversations. And like Kevin, before he also mentioned, this calls, monthly calls. This year, Git Press actually initiated this regular Haiku tech calls, and that clearly had a positive impact on advancing Haiku and beyond, I think, across projects. My third point about, community code contribution, this is very much, linked to community ownership to me over infrastructure. So if something actually developed, in the community for the community as a code contribution, you want to make sure that actually that goes back to the Samvera core, Samvera code base, and stays, within the community. But at least, from my own experience, this was a great conversation to have actually in the project and also with the other project partners in Haiku community. That's why I just wanted to add this here, to have this conversation at the beginning and also keep going actually ongoing conversations. And for the last point, I'll just get back to you.
Thanks, Ilkay. The last point I think is one that we can all take home, and we're talking about being agile with a little a. But also realistic about project deliverables, and things that keep us grounded in reality are clearly defined deliverables, clearly defined work packages, but also coming back to those when there are questions. And just yesterday, Ilkay and I were talking about the user stories that we had worked so hard on. I was like, oh yeah, we need to go back and check on those for a couple of questions it should resolve. And so, not just doing the work, but remembering what you did and using it throughout a project is always a good practice. So with that, I'm going to turn it over back to let's see, who's our next on our panel? Should be Jenny.
Hello. Right. Bear with me 2 seconds while I remember how to share my screen, how I remember to do anything. I missed the very first part of the earlier panel because we were in a sprint meeting just before this. And I've just come back from a lovely week off and I'm like, oh, wait, what's my job?
We're so glad to see you, Jenny. I'll cover for you while you get ready. Yes, Jenny, can I share why you were off?
Of course you can, yeah.
So when we scheduled this panel, Jenny said, sure, I'll be just back from my honeymoon, literally on the 19th of October. So huge thanks to Jenny for being with us today. Longtime collaborator, but not usually, coming in from quite this much time off.
I know it's dangerous. I might get used to this, it's a bit worrying. Thank you, though. It's so nice to. I'm just very sorry that Ellen actually came on a trip to London and I missed her because I was away. So that was a real shame. But hopefully we will get to have a non-virtual meetup one day.
It's going to happen someday.
It will. I was very jealous. You got to go to see the Paddington exhibition and everything. I was like, oh, I would have loved to have done that with all of you.
There's a story behind that I'll put in the Slack channel.
Oh, wonderful. So thank you so much for handing over the baton, Ilkay and Ellen. My name is Jenny Basford. I'm the Repository Services Specialist at the British Library. I'm one of 3 of us in our Repository Services team. Sarah, our lovely colleague, Repository Services Lead, would also have been here today, but she has also passed on the holiday baton, or I've passed it on to her. She's gone on holiday this week. So you drew the short straw with somebody who's just come back off holiday. Basically, I think that Ellen and Ilkay have set a wonderful kind of context and setting for this to talk about all of the really great community work that's being done. And I will touch on a little bit of that at the end, as well, of how the British Library's work, the shared repository service that we have, has kind of fed into those very briefly, but mostly what I kind of wanted to focus on was just giving an update basically on what we've been up to since Open Repositories. and possibly earlier if people didn't catch up at open repositories. So we are also fans of Haiku, so we're also using Haiku as well. We put this slide in here just to kind of show the kind of architecture that we have set up here. So our first project that we had up and running was our Cultural Heritage Shared Repository. These are all organisations that are a bit like the British Library. They're from the GLAM sector. So nice to be part of the GLAM sector. The galleries, libraries, archives and museums. And you can see all their names there, but we have a nice kind of variety of organisations from across the UK there. Admittedly, there's quite a lot of London focus, but you know, we are hoping for more partners to be joining us as we kind of go throughout the next couple of years. Obviously, COVID has had a huge impact on organisations in this sector. So joining a shared repository service, although it's something that many people have expressed a really big interest in doing, financially, you know, other things have to come first at the moment. And then since we last spoke, I think at Open Repositories, we have managed to start work on our NHS shared repository as well. So that's the National Health Service that's that we love in the UK, and it is split into NHS England, Scotland, Wales, etc. So we've actually been focusing working with 6 pilot partners from NHS England organisations, which has been really kindly funded by Health Education England. So whereas our Cultural Heritage Repository has a shared search that kind of shares across 6 tenants, so each organisation has their own tenant. In the NHS repository, it's 1 tenant and all these 6 organisations, and actually there's more than 6 because some of them are working as consortia in their own right, all log into 1 individual repository, so 1 tenant. So it's what I thought would be nice is to kind of compare and contrast the 2 kind of models, if that kind of makes sense, and see if it's of any interest to you all. So just to kind of recap on what we were doing in the Cultural Heritage Repository, we've got everybody on a single instance, and then we have this shared search layer, which I saw a little bit of. It all appeared last week, and it's on our staging site at the moment, so it will be there very, very soon on the public view. In one of the things, or some of the things that we offer as part of that shared repository service, is that every organisation that joins gets their own tenant, their own repository, which means they're very much in control of the kind of content that they put in and the ways in which they manage that. So they might choose to just have 1 or 2 individuals who upload everything for an organisation, or if they wanted, they could have everybody, you know, all of their researchers directly uploading their content themselves. So they're able to kind of make those decisions themselves. All of these organisations, branding is a really important part of each of these institutions, and that goes for the virtual space as well. Even more so with COVID, with all of these organisations having to close their doors to the public over the last 1.5 years. So we really wanted to be able to give them a place that they could kind of promote and, you know, continue their organisation's online branding and logo, unique kind of URL and things like that, in order to kind of make it part of the same website for them in their own right. But also kind of maintaining part of this shared kind of collaboration between all these other organisations as well, in the research sector and the research kind of context. One of the things that they get from doing this, or some of the things I hope that they get from doing this, is they're benefiting from having our expertise, because we are the ones who've kind of taken the plunge, investigated which systems to use and things like that. And we also have a bit more experience in terms of running repositories ourselves. So all the partners come to us when they have queries, whether those are technical queries or kind of content, copyright related queries. Admittedly, sometimes the very technical queries then get immediately referred to our technical suppliers, but we do our best. So our shared NHS open access repository is, I should have said, the iro.bl.uk. IRO stands for Independent Research Organisation, which is a term used by one of the main funding bodies here in the UK to refer to all of these kinds of organisations as a whole. So that's why we chose that URL, just as a kind of landing point. But the NHS one is a tenant that sits on there as well. So at the moment it sits at nhs.iro.bl.uk. And our colleagues in the NHS have only just started adding things to it. So there's not loads in there at the moment, but you can go along there and have a look and search to your heart's content. This project is going to run until May next year, and these are our kind of pilot partners. As you can see, so it's very geographic. So the NHS is the NHS, basically, whichever country it's in. But then within that is broken down into all sorts of different kind of essentially geographic areas. But sometimes you also get them broken down into geographic areas and also areas of expertise or discipline. So the third one down, you can see there is the Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health NHS Foundation Trust. So that's their focus. But then above that, you have the Black Country Health Libraries Consortium. So that's going to be lots of different libraries all feeding into one who are based in that area of the UK. And then Barts Health NHS Trust, that's a health trust, that's a hospital in London that kind of runs services from within there. So you can see there's all these different ways of how the NHS can be formed. They're mostly geographic in their kind of the way they're split. But the important bit is the NHS, that's the identity, that's the branding, that's the thing that the public recognise and look for. So on the public side, we've separated everybody, each of those partners want to kind of designate and show that their content is theirs. So they each have a collection. So we use that kind of communities and collections kind of to use the repository parlance for it. So as a partner uploads content, they just make sure they add it to the right collection, so that you could search across everything, or you can search within one collection. It's quite easy to kind of see where something belongs. One of the things that we experimented with when we set up our demo repository for our NHS colleagues was using the admin set concept. So when you go into Haiku, and I think probably Hyrax as well, you're able to control the workflows. So whether something needs to be approved or not, by controlling which admin set content goes into. So we tried having an admin set for each of those partner organizations, but it was, I have to be honest, a little bit of a nightmare. So that's one of the findings that we've come up with so far, is that so for us it has been easier, and for our partners it's been easier to have everything just sit in that default admin set. I realize this is probably a bit technical and nerdy if you're not already a user of Haiku, and if you want to talk about it later, we can kind of share some screens and show it to you. And then the only way that it's kind of divided and kind of demarcated is the public collection, if that makes sense. The reason why I think admin sets are a bit of a nightmare is because everybody who has access to this repository for the NHS one, they are all admins. So it doesn't matter if they're depositing into a specific admin set, they can actually see what's in all the other admin sets as well, because they have a very high level of access. So I think that would be one of the things that I would suggest that we might want to change if we continue with this project and it continues with it being all in one repository. But this has also meant that the kind of service features that we're working out and going through are therefore things like you can all access each other's content. How are you going to make sure that you govern this and accidentally don't delete anything, etc., etc. But one thing they do seem very happy with and so keen with so far is that NHS identity is really kind of emphasized. But this is a pilot project, which is a lovely thing because it means you can kind of experiment and see how it goes and maybe switch things as we go along and see. And you know, the reason they came to the BL in the first place to test this out is because they were seen and were really interested in how we've been doing things with the cultural heritage partners. Really quickly, because I'm aware that Amanda has her turn next as well. Some of the things we've been doing over the last few months since I spoke at Open Repositories is we're still going through our migration from our previous supplier, which was Ubiquity, who we still get to work with via Advancing Haiku, which is great, to Notch 8, who are our new supplier. We've added a few new kind of resource type descriptors. We already had, I would say, at least 50, but we've added a few new ones for the NHS. we've switched from using what Ubiquity had, a kind of bespoke customized import and export tool. We're now using bulk racks, and we're really experimenting and really pushing that, I think, to its limits. I hope not, Trey, don't mind me saying that. We've got the universal viewer working, it all looks great. Our data site integration is coming along as well, and we've been able to use the kind of funder lookup again, which is another thing that was very important to our research governance and research development teams. And then finally, the kind of community aspects that we've been kind of involved with. We've really enjoyed being part of things like Advancing Haiku and the other kind of new-ish communities that we have around. So we were so delighted when we found the pals, who you're going to hear from next, and we set up our regular water coolers with them. It was just so nice to find other people using Haiku and being part of the Haiku interest group as well. We've been able to continue that. Our kind of community theme has been really important to us because we're obviously operating within kind of established communities and collaborations already with the IROs and our NHS England libraries. And also we feel quite lucky that we've been able to work with both Ubiquity, and we still get to do that. And we've been working with Notch 8 because when there've been developments that we had and kind of features we had in our old repository that we don't yet have in our new one, we've been able to say, oh, well, Ubiquity know how to do that. They did that already. So the two have been able to set up the tech calls that Ilkay and Ellen mentioned, and really kind of helps encourage and foster that collaborative spirit, I think. But finally, the last thing that we have coming up is our migration should be done very, very soon. But then for the future, we're looking to see how our NHS pilot kind of carries on, adding more people to the IRO and Cultural Heritage Service. And as I put there, continue to fill up our repositories where we're very excited to just add things and make content available. So we're really happy with it. And so, yeah, thank you. Over to you again, Ellen.
Thanks, Jenny. That was great. And if you have a second, do pop into the Slack channel. There was a really robust conversation going on about some issues that you raised that were well answered by folks in the community, and that conversation is still ongoing. All right, Amanda, all yours.
Thanks. Can you see my slides, or are you seeing my notes?
We see your slides.
Okay, great. So hi, and thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, LK. I'm Amanda Herford. I'm Scholarly Communications Director for PALNI, and I'm one of the project leads for the Haiku for Consortia project. Haiku for Consortia is a joint project between PALNI and PALC. And we are two consortia of very different sizes and geographic locations and different service models and all of that, but we share a vision for collaborative repository service with Haiku. So today I'll be representing our team and giving you an update of where we've been, the work we've done, and where we're going, and how we value community and how we work in this community. All right, so I did mention that I'm kind of representing a larger team here today. I did want to mention who the other folks on our team are. We have Jill Morris, who is the Executive Director for PALC, Kirsten Leonard, who is the Executive Director for PALNI. They're our overall project directors. And then we also have our other project lead, which is Gretchen Gigan, who's the project manager for the project. And Nick Stanton-Rourke, who is a newer key member to the team. He's the one that's been working closely with our piloters and giving a lot of technical help and documentation and testing and all of that. So we're really excited to have him aboard. So to start off with a little bit of a status update, we do have a live production instance at haikucommons.org. It's a multi-tenant instance in use by 4 consortia. So we have us who are using it, the PALs, PALNI and PALC, plus new piloters at the Lewis and the Viva consortia. And we're working with Notch 8 for development and hosting services. So back in August, we did some data collection and we collected some statistics about our repository and where we are. And I thought I'd go ahead and share those with you now. So we have 5 active tenants in what we're calling production, and 10 of those are live. The other 5 are sort of under construction and being worked on behind the scenes. We have 13 other repositories that are also hidden that are just sort of testing or demo repositories or pilots, if you will, that are not live. And these stats might be a little bit out of date because they're from August, but at the time that we collected the statistics, we had 252 collections and nearly 5,000 works in our shared repository. So the work that we completed under our previous IMLS grant really focused on what we had named our grant, which was scaling up a collaborative consortial IR. And we were also trying to figure out how we might better support the consortial use case in multi-tenant administration of Haiku. So with feedback from both of our consortia, actual users, we defined some specifications for development of some predetermined key areas, such as theme templates. We created theme templates in order to offer our libraries more choice and some more customization options. And we also worked on groups and permissions to better serve what we call collaborative workflows. And we created 2 new work types to support common scenarios for library publishing, which are OER and ETD. So we also started piloting the service during that time period with actual users and started figuring out how our consortia can work together on a shared repository service. So that was our previous grant. And that brings us up to our current grant and plans for the future. So the latest grant that we were awarded from IMLS now focuses on removing barriers to adoption. So in this grant, we continue to spend some time on defining what we're calling our operational model. And we plan to translate what we learn in building this operational model of how does this actually work into a toolkit for repository collaboration. And this time in our grant for development, we decided to, instead of coming up with a predefined set of work that we want to do, we'll shape our work plans directly from feedback that we receive from our users about barriers. So for the first phase of the project, which we've actually already started, it's a period of kind of trying to figure out where the problem points are. And we think that at least some of our work will address some things that have already been mentioned from our users, and those are metadata flexibility, accessibility, and file handling. So overall, our goal for this grant is to increase flexibility, accessibility, and usability of Haiku, but we really do plan to let the user research guide our way in order to make Haiku attractive to a wide variety of potential adopters. So I'm not expecting you to take this in really, but I did want to show our Gantt chart here to show our overall schedule for the grant, which runs until July of 2023, and how it's divided into 3 work streams: our user research and analysis, our tech development in 6 sprints, and our operational model and toolkit development. And if you want a closer look at this chart, it's in our full grant proposal, which is on the IMLS site, and we'll make these slides available to you. So we've started our research phase by gathering some baseline data from our current users. We recently put out our satisfaction survey, asking a whole bunch of questions about how our users are satisfied with different functions and features of Haiku. And we have a lot of data to sort through. We really haven't started the analysis on that yet. But at first glance, we're seeing that our users are largely satisfied with the process of describing and editing single works, but several have mentioned that they're unsatisfied with our current metadata templates offered through our stock work types. So our plans are to dig in there and to find out better, what the needs are there and how we can address it moving forward. And we're also gathering stats on repository growth, hopefully that we can, repository statistics now, so hopefully we can show growth over the life of the grant, things like size and numbers of repository, web traffic, and diversity of our populations. And we'll continue to collect data on a regular schedule going forward through the grant. And we're also planning to have a UX consultant help with surveys, interviews, focus groups, and usability tests. So sneak preview, we are now seeking a UX consultant for the short-term position, which goes through June of 2022. So if you're interested in this, if you have knowledge and user experience and you'd like to work with us, please do consider applying. There's the email address on the screen if you're interested to apply or ask questions, and you can visit our website to learn more. I'm just going to kind of speed through this because I realize we're out of time. So I wanted to mention our code contributions to Haiku. Wherever possible, we really do try to contribute back the code from all of our work. And thanks to Crystal Richardson from Natch8 for this list. This lists out really all of the contributions that we've made into Haiku code, Haiku core. So our previous grant resulted in improvements to bulk racks, themes and customization, and lots of other things. And we have some upcoming contributions listed there on the right that we're currently working on. So that's been a really interesting process to consider what others might want and if they want the option to do what we did. And a really good way to discuss all that has been through the Haiku interest group, which we consider as sharing part of the community. So for us, it's not just about contributing code or borrowing from others. It's about making connections and working with our colleagues in the interest group and in the water cooler in order to stay up to date and avoid duplicating efforts. So Ellen, I don't know if we want to switch back, but I've got a call for community input here. Please do consider reaching out to us if you're interested in telling us about your barriers with Haiku, and we'd love to get your feedback on our operational model and our toolkit, and we invite you to join the conversation.
Thanks, Amanda. We are at time for the panel, I believe. So let's continue the conversation in Slack. It's been great there, and we can do that. The one thing that I will put back out to the community that I know we wanted to say is, please keep talking to us if you're planning a project, if you're interested in either using any of our implementations or are thinking about what Haiku doesn't do. Keep talking to us. We really, really want to hear that. So anything else from any of the panelists that you want to put in as a last thought? With that, we'll say thank you, and we're in Slack, and you can find us on our various projects as well. Thanks all.
Thank you, Ellen. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Amanda. You're 2 minutes over the time, but I will invite our next set of speakers for the interest group updates. Jan, is that you? We'll go first, or?
Sure, I can certainly go first.
Okay, please do.
All right, you can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. My name is Jennifer Young, and I am the metadata coordinator at Northwestern University. And I'm here to talk to you today about, give a quick update about the roadmaps alignment group and what we have been working on over the past 6 months or so since our last virtual connect. Oops. So overall, our objectives are sort of to take a high-level view of the various roadmaps for the various products in the Samvera community, such as Haiku and Avalon and Valkyrie and Hyrax, looking at what features are being developed and sort of people have alluded to code reclamation. We're interested in that and what things can be brought back into the community that may be developed outside. So I wanted to give, I was going to show briefly a bit of a report that we gave to partners in July. We asked all the partners at the time to focusing on Hyrax, letting us know if they're using Hyrax, and also if they've contributed any, like if they've done any maintenance and contributed back to core. And as you can see in this, these little charts, 63% of partners are using Hyrax, and almost 38 have contributed back, 38%. So that's not bad at all. So it's great. And of course, we always want it to be more. But we also looked at the types of features that people have been working on, partners have been working on particularly. As you can see, batch ingest, DOI, bulk actions, definitely not a surprise, I think, at all at that. And then we also kind of grouped by the number of institutions working on these areas. And as you can see, UI UX is like the highest, with data modeling being like the second highest. So one of the things we wanted to do was sort of looking ahead of how do we want to take this information and bring it back into the work that we need to do. So we were looking at the code reclamation feature. We decided to focus on DOI. And then also looking at what other features can be added to Hyrax and what can be added as a gem. And we're still doing some of that analysis right now. Again, just looking at the data, since we were focusing on Hyrax, working with Julie as the PO to sort of, how can we look at these things for the roadmap? Also looking at for developer Congress topics, feature sprints, and of course, one of the outcomes of this was the maintenance pledge drive, which I hope you have all pledged to do, to sort of like how do we keep the maintenance going, let alone the features. One outstanding thing that we discovered while we were trying to get information from all the partners is that trying to figure out who to actually contact was very difficult sometimes, because whoever is listed as the partner contact may not be the repository contact. Or if an institution has multiple repositories, they may have different contacts. So we've been working on trying to come up with a proposal for having a list of these contacts publicly available, so that when we do these kinds of analyses, we don't have to sort of recreate the wheel every time and like, oh, do you know somebody at Princeton? Do you know somebody here? Just sort of, we have a list and that work's already done. What's next? We plan on updating at Partners Quarterly. Again, continuing the work of the cross-technology coordination processes, which the maintenance hours pledge drive, again, pledge, is one of those outcomes. And then also looking, we started creating a document to identify technical debt and any blockers to that, to see like, this is something that is a technical debt and it is an impediment in these Samvera communities. So like Hyrax, Avalon, Haiku, something else. So, excuse me. So that is something that we're starting to work on and share out. And that is my quick update. And I'm not sure if Kate or Nora wants to go next. But of course, any questions?
I can go next whenever it's appropriate.
Sure.
Okay, shall I go now?
Please do, please do. Okay, I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, thank you. All right, can you all see my screen and hear me?
Yes, all good.
Thank you. Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Lynch. I'm a software development manager at Princeton. My pronouns are they, them. And today I am providing a short report on the branch renaming working group's work wrapping up in 2021. So just for some context, when we're referring to branches, this is Git Branching, which is a feature of version control systems that allows for shared code bases in the code repository that's worked on over time by multiple people with their own local copies. Changes are encapsulated in branches in these local copies of the code and are then merged back into the default branch in the baseline of the code when it's ready. For years, it's been common practice for the default branch to be called master, which is a harmful term with strong, long-held connotations of racism and subjugation of human beings. As a result, this harmful language is present in GitHub's branch structure, in code bases, and in our common language in software development communities. Our group, the Samvera Branch Renaming Working Group, was formed to address that in the community with a mission to uphold our code of conduct and reflect our core values by eliminating coding jargon that perpetuates racist systems, languages, and mentalities. We determined that in order to do this, we needed to do the following. Determine an appropriate branch name rather than master for the default branch and get this accepted by the Samvera community. Assess technical impact, that is what could break in deployment and development workflows when the branch gets renamed. Develop a plan for making the default branch name and other changes to address that impact. And finally, do the thing. Make the changes to the repositories and leave us all in a good position to move forward with development. And to summarize, we did it. Over the summer, in coordination with the community, we completed this work in the repositories under the Samvera GitHub organization. And over the last few months, we've addressed the repositories in Samvera Labs as well. This amounts to roughly 109 repositories being changed with roughly 2 to 6 issues filed, and something like 2 or 3 pull requests per repository addressing these issues, filed by members of the Samvera branch group and others in the community to begin addressing them. As of this week, all Samvera and Samvera Labs repositories have taken part in this change. So making the change to the default branch itself is really easy. At this point, you can just go into the branch editing settings as shown here, and you can just rename the branch, and then it percolates down throughout the repository. But part of our work as a group was to figure out what else needs to happen to support this and persist the change. It's worth noting that while default branch renaming is really achievable now, one can still accidentally recreate a branch called master in one of these repositories. And this is against the goal and also breaks a lot of the automatic fixes that GitHub puts into place after you change the default branch name. So we identified the top things that needed to happen to prevent that. Part of my work, I wrote a small script here that uses the GitHub API and allowed us to create issues for these tasks, many of which members of the branch renaming group also submitted PRs to address, as follows. Rename the master branch to main, update the README and contributor documentation to reflect updated intentions to avoid the use of a branch called master, add an integration test via Circle CI if that particular integration suite is implemented in the project. That will fail if there's a branch called master in the repository, and adding a note for someone to review code for any hard-coded legacy references to the master branch. Here's a list of some documentation we put together as a group, our effectiveness evaluation from last year, deliverables from last year and this year, and the scripts that we worked up to streamline this effort. Our work is basically done at this point. An email will be going out to the community next week from our group that will be summarizing this work and what this means for you. For instance, if you are a maintainer of a Samvera Labs repository, I humbly ask that you please go check your repositories for any PRs around this work. We're happy to work with you on any of this. Our group is small but dedicated, and we've worked hard on this change. So if you have questions or think anything is missing from the remediation effort for your repository, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Finally, a huge thank you to the members of the branch renaming group listed here. Thank you to Heather Greer-Klein for facilitating communication and planning around this. Thank you to the Component Maintenance Working Group for helping us to assess impact. And thank you to everyone and anyone in the community who helps us push this work forward. Contact us at the Branch Renaming Working Group Samvera Slack, as seen here. We're also on Confluence. That's the link to our group's page. If you want to talk through your own remediation use cases or you have any ideas for how to improve what we've done, we're very open. We are here. Thank you very much. And I believe the next person would be Nora.
Thank you, Kate. Yes. Nora, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Can you see my slides there?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Nora Zimmerman. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm at Lafayette College, along with Anna Goslin at UNC Chapel Hill. We are the co-facilitators of the Samvera Metadata Interest Group, also known as SMIG. So I just have a very brief update on the group's activities and some information perhaps for newcomers about our group. The Samvera Metadata Interest Group exists to provide a space where members of the Samvera community as well as newcomers or potential adopters can ask metadata questions. We collaborate on base metadata recommendations for Samvera software products. And we work to further interoperability and sharing of metadata practices and documentation. We meet monthly on the fourth Tuesday from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. Our wiki page is here, linked on this slide, but you can also find it on the Working and Interest Group Hub off of the Samvera Confluence. And we have a metadata channel on the community Slack where you can ask questions as well. We, at this point, only have one active subgroup, the URI Selection Working Group, and they are currently working on setting up a community vocabulary manager namespace. Since Samvera Connect 2020, we've done a lot. The Controlled Vocabulary Decision Tree Working Group created a document that provides an evaluation criteria for controlled vocabularies. So to help walk folks through how to evaluate whether a namespace or controlled vocabulary might fit their needs, their use case for describing their collections. They also created a handy spreadsheet with many information about many different controlled vocabularies that are out there, including those that would be a good fit for describing collections and materials about marginalized groups in a sensitive way. So congratulations to that working group for their really good work. I've linked out to the decision tree itself in this slide. The Hyrax version 3 metadata application profile working group made updates to the samvera.github.io knowledge base in order to bring it up to date with the out-of-the-box map of Hyrax version 3. They also created an example of the Hyrax map for the machine-readable metadata specification YAML. In addition to those two subgroups, SMIG collectively reviewed and provided feedback for open issues on the Hyrax GitHub that were labeled metadata. So we met about 4 of our meetings over the course of the spring and early summer of 2020 were mainly focused on doing that review and helping to work through the backlog of Hyrax GitHub issues as pertains to metadata. And we continued to collaborate and liaise with the Hyrax Maintenance Working Group and Roadmaps Alignment Group. So our next meeting will be next Tuesday on the 26th from 2 to 3. And we will be discussing our plans for this next year. So I hope that you'll join us. We're always welcoming new members. So if any of this sounds interesting to you or you're a metadata adjacent person, feel free to join us. So that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Nora. I'm just checking whether there was any question. Not in our Q&A box or not in the Slack channel. So I would like to thank you, 3 of you, Jen, Kate, Nora. So I guess, we can just close it here and we can go a little bit early to our break times, I guess. We will have, last round of, speaking, at the half past. So I'll put my, slides again so that you can see what time we can come back. Hope that's okay. Thanks, everyone. So we'll see you at the half past. Hello, welcome back everyone. We have now 2 speakers chugging along Surfliners 3 years later. We have Chrissy with us and Jessica. I will just leave the floor to you, Chrissy.
Hey, Chrissy.
Hi, Jessica. Can everyone see our screen and hear us?
Yes,
I can see your screen.
Fantastic. So hi, everyone. We're your conductors today. I'm Chrissy Rismeyer. I'm the Director of Digital Library Development at the UC Santa Barbara Library. I use pronouns she, her.
I'm Jessica Hild. I'm the Manager of Applications Development and Web Services at the far superior UC San Diego Library. My pronouns are she and her.
So I do need to point out, because Jessica makes me, that it's very, very important to note that these pictures of us are actually when we were riding the actual Surfliner train. So we'll just start out there.
It's very important. It's a theme, friends.
So to get us started, what is Project Surfliner? So Project Surfliner is a collaborative project of the UC San Diego and UC Santa Barbara libraries to create our next generation Samvera-based digital library products. Jessica dubbed us Project Surfliner after the Amtrak route that links our campuses together. And it's also the reason for all of the train puns, railroad graphics, and products named after historic trains.
I may have a couple of regrets about that.
But more importantly, Project Surfliner is the collaboration effort. It's building and leveraging the strengths and experiences of each of our campuses to focus on shared concepts and products. So just quick Surfliner by the numbers. As of today, it has been 1,069 days since we officially kicked off the project. And to quickly summarize our accomplishments since then, we've had 28 team members from 3 institutions, UCSD, UCSB, and recently UCLA in a limited capacity, working on 5 products, 2 of which are now in production. The team has participated in 57 sprints, made more than 2,200 commits. We've also sent 19,000 Slack messages, and this one is for Jessica. We have received a UC Information Technology Award, and the shark fin, which is also for Jessica, is hidden in the Surfliner artwork.
That award was the top award. I'm very goal-oriented. I just want to point that out. All right, but we're not here today to talk about Surfliner. Really, we're here to talk about the lessons we learned and about how to collaborate successfully with another institution. We will start with relationships, move on to philosophy, and then end our journey with our destination, persistence. So let's begin our journey with relationships. So the first step to collaborating with another institution is to build relationships with peers. And that may seem simple, but if you're interested in collaborating with another institution, you can't just start with, hey, let's work together. This is a picture from Samvera Connect 2018. This dinner didn't just happen at Samvera Connect. Chrissy and folks from our library have been talking for years, sometimes exploring topics together, aligning on ideas, or just getting a better understanding of the way that each other's libraries worked. And then I came along in 2018, and Arwen from our library and Chrissy were already haranguing me about working together on some project because they knew each other's work intimately. Talk with peers about the work that you do, listen to others do the same, and help each other learn and explore new things. Even if you're not working together quite yet, you're laying down the tracks to work together in the future. So where do you talk to your peers? So this is why conferences are so important. You also get to eat flaming cheese and stinky garlic dip, which I did with Chrissy at that first dinner. But go to conferences and find people who are working on the same things you're working on or trying to solve a similar problem. Go talk and have conversations with those people afterwards. Now, we all love to go to conferences, but especially these last couple of years, we're not able to go to a lot of conferences. We've seen virtual conference attendance skyrocket because not everybody has the funds to attend a conference. But being on Samvera Slack, participating and working in interest groups, and there are tons of people that are interested in the same problems you are. And if you can't find any existing groups, well, you may need to lay your own tracks. You've checked out these venues and you can't find a place to connect with people. Create your own group. You can do that on Slack or in a Samvera working group. When I started at UCSD, there wasn't a women in tech group. That doesn't mean that no one was interested in women in tech. There just wasn't a group. So put a little effort in it and the payoff can be really amazing. So is everybody on board? It doesn't matter if you've created a bunch of interest groups and are working together, merge your tracks, and you're sharing train rides. If the California Public Utilities Commission didn't sign on, you're probably going to get shut down. This is a very long, drawn-out train analogy that just means that you need to get administrative buy-in. If this has been a gradual process, you've probably generated interest in leadership, and it won't be hard to craft a story that you're ready to couple your cars. But if you're going to have to convince people along the way, it's best to have a succinct story. Why doesn't it work now? What's changing? What's the challenge? And how does that align with your bigger picture? This is probably a good place to acknowledge that certain aspects of this were probably easier for the Surfliner team because we were working in the same university system. We did not have to deal with things like intellectual property rights. Copyright for both campuses is owned by the UC Regents, and our administration didn't require a formal MOU. However, within the Samvera community, there are several examples of successful multi-institution collaborations, not within the same university system, including the ones between the University of Oregon and Oregon State, or Oregon Digital, collaboration between Northwestern and Indiana on Avalon. Okay, so you've built relationships, gotten administrative buy-in, and you're ready to ride the rails together. The second step is to figure out your collaboration philosophy. How are you going to work together? Who is going to do that? And where are you going to do that?
So for Surfliner, we spent much of our first in-person implementation meeting hashing this all out. What products were we going to work on first? What tools were we going to use? What meetings did we need? And who was going to fill which roles? So what we ended up developing in that meeting was a sprint framework, drawing inspiration from Agile and Scrum methodologies. This framework includes clearly defined teams and roles. Because we have multiple products being developed as part of the collaboration, we identified 2 distinct types of teams, which meet on a regular basis as part of our ongoing work. The project team as a whole, and then individual product teams. Each product team is comprised of a different group of individuals from both campuses, but includes the same roles and follows the same overall philosophy and methodology. This has been a good structure for us as it helps team members more easily transition between working on different products. Having clearly defined roles and responsibilities also helps each team member understand what they should be contributing. We also agreed that Surfliner development would be done in 2-week sprint cycles with the same set of meetings in each sprint. Some of those meetings are done as separate product teams, but daily stand-ups, sprint reviews, and retrospectives are done as combined meetings with the whole project team. This helps keep everyone up to date on the progress and also helps prevent siloed product development. In terms of scheduling, after some trial and error, we decided that having set times for the project teams to work together worked best for us. We currently operate in 56-day on-off work cycles with a 2-week buffer period on each end, or approximately 5 months a year. Having set times for working together in advance helped us balance our local development needs with that of the collaboration. So when starting up a collaborative relationship, making practical decisions like what tools you're going to use is really helpful in keeping things running smoothly. We ended up standardizing around a common set of online tools: Zoom, our Surfliner UC Tech Slack channel, Google Drive, GitLab, and Retrium. And we ensured that project leadership from both campuses had the ability to easily add new members. We also ask and kind of require that all team members use these tools when working on Surfliner. However, beyond tools and mechanics, we also found it helpful to develop shared expectations. What does participation mean, and what should each partner expect to invest and to get in return? Having this kind of open and upfront conversation can help avoid resentment down the line, something that we've seen frequently in the various communities that we're active in. This is also super helpful when collaborating within this context, given the varying sizes of institutions in the community. Individual campus partners may not have the same staffing levels. So for Surfliner, we decided early on to create a matrix of what participation meant. Developing this ensured that we were on the same page and also has given us something to share with other UC campus libraries when they've reached out to learn more. And you'll notice that we don't include specific numbers of staff in the investment column. This was done deliberately because we did not want to exclude smaller campuses from joining us in the collaboration if they were interested. From the beginning, we recognized that for the project to succeed, we would also need to develop a deeper shared framework for how we work together. Some of this was technical, like development methodology, but a lot of it was about the team culture. This may be the most important conversation to have when starting up a new collaborative relationship. Because for us, all of this happened pre-COVID, only a handful of the Surfliner team were remote workers at the beginning of the collaboration. But we decided from the beginning to operate as though we were all remote because we were all remote from each other. And it turns out that good collaborative remote work practices are also good cross-campus collaborative practices. So for example, in order to build team cohesion and avoid local bias in development decisions, we decided early on that every product team should include members from each campus, ideally with tech leads and product owners from different campuses. This practice also helped us avoid water cooler decision-making among team members from the same campus. We strive for inclusion and open communication by using agreed-upon communication channels and setting the norm that important conversations should be surfaced to those channels so that all team members can see and participate. We also do our best to create good documentation, both in the code and also document when and why decisions are made. This extends to recording important meetings and all of our sprint reviews and making them available to all online. On a side note, because the team has been working together this way since the beginning, they really didn't break stride at all when we all transitioned to working from home because of the pandemic. Another thing that was so important for these types of relationships is iterative reflection and improvement. Although we did set up much of our initial collaborative framework in that first implementation meeting, we haven't stopped working on it since. We are constantly reflecting on our past to improve our future work together as a team. We hold regular retros at the end of every sprint, and these allow us to act on problems that came up in the sprint immediately rather than letting them continue and fester. Most of our daily work norms came out of this process. This practice also helps the team feel empowered to share feedback or new ideas, knowing that if we try it and it doesn't work, we can talk about it and move on. So don't skip your retros, folks, or whatever technique you use for iterative improvement. They really are crucial for healthy collaboration. And if you need a good remote retro tool, Retrium is really fantastic. But before you start to think that everything has been sunshine and rainbows and palm trees the whole time, and this was all super easy, I'm going to pass it on to Jessica to talk about persistence.
So we definitely had some challenges along the way. So many challenges. It has been really wonderful working together, but there are practical and technical challenges, like getting Outlook and Gmail to play well together. I can't tell you how much this drives me crazy. They really just don't like to work together. Our licensing agreements with GitLab was a huge process that lasted almost more than a year, Chrissy, more than a year. Teaching people how to use the Agile process, finding the correct collaborators who need to be in the room. These are practical problems that can be annoying and tedious, but at the end of the day, we found that these were the most solvable problems. There are psychological challenges, and they're really risky and they're not easy to solve. So the first one that we came across is team newness. The project came together eerily fast, and I think because of this, we expected the team just to jump in and work together. I think a lot of us forgot that it takes a while for a team to build trust, and trust is so important when you're working in a team. We have worked to resolve this in several ways. We encourage pair programming. We call out merge requests in daily stand-up. We provide guidance on how to provide constructive code reviews. And most importantly, we talked about the awkwardness in retros. Communication is a tough one. We had several challenges related to communication. And while open communication is one of our principles, we learned that there's such things as over communication. We received feedback from stakeholders that they got too many invites, too many emails. We also stopped holding a weekly public stand-up because team members and stakeholders felt like it didn't provide additional value over what they could learn via other channels. But that doesn't mean we solved this one. We still run into the problem where people feel left out or not up to speed with what we're doing. So then are we under communicating? We're always experimenting with new ways to talk to our stakeholders. Transparency is an aspect of our communication strategy that can be super scary and will probably always remain a challenge. The things that you're bad at, everyone will know by the end of this. The thing that one stakeholder really wants, but we're not planning on doing for a while, they're going to find out right away. The transparency breeds trust, though, and that's within our team and within our stakeholders. Onboarding, we totally failed at this. Following our first successful work cycle, we spun up 2 new product teams. Our tech leads and developers had worked on in the first cycle, but the product owners were both new. We had tons of documentation and sent them to 2 days of formal product owner training, but really never walked them through how to be a product owner and work within the Surfliner team. Give a shout out to the value of retros again. All of this came out in a retro. We ended up addressing both these challenges in several ways again, but we're always learning from each other the things where we're lacking. When we come to retro with an attitude we're there to learn, not to judge, we find it's very easy to make the changes for what's best for the team. Another challenge has been balancing campus priorities, the give and take of working together. There are times when one of our stakeholder groups needs a particular feature developed ASAP, and that means the priorities of that campus may need to take a temporary backseat. The other campus. For us, this has been balanced out naturally in the long run, possibly because we're mindful of not asking for this too frequently. However, depending on the collaboration, it might be good to develop some guidelines in advance on how to deal with these types of situations.
So we've had a couple of times where things just went completely off the rails. The first time this happened was in August 2020 when Santa Barbara had a major outage of our Cylinders audio archive while we were on a Surfliner work cycle, and it required immediate attention from the entire engineering team.
From the UCSD side, we knew that UCSB was having local issues, but we didn't know or understand the extent. From our side, we were working along, but getting little or no feedback, which really killed our momentum. So I talked with my team and I decided that I needed to reach out to Chrissy. That's August 18th, 2020.
So I received this Slack message from Jessica, and I'll be honest, I low-key freaked out. I was so super nervous to have this conversation because I felt like we had let San Diego folks down by just kind of disappearing.
It was nervousness on both ends. I was nervous to reach out and say like, hey, this is awkward, but I think you ghosted us. We ended up adding a how to handle derailments topic to our all hands meeting that September and developed a formal protocol on how to handle a situation where one campus partner suddenly becomes unavailable, pulling the cord if one or more partners need to drop out. It would be up to the remaining campus still on sprint on whether or not they wanted to go forward or stop the sprint. Once the fire's out, the group reconvenes and has a retrospective and determines how to move forward. When a similar situation occurred this past spring at UCSD, my campus, because of urgent work related to a system-wide ILS project, it was so much easier to navigate because we had done it before. It doesn't mean there wasn't anxiety. I totally freaked out. I didn't want us to let UCSB down. More importantly, I didn't want them just to say, forget it, you're no longer in the project, which is definitely like how I work. But you know what we did? We talked about it. We recognized the anxiety and saying, hey, we feel this way. And it's a big part of why the project works.
So, but despite all of these challenges, the impacts of the collaboration have been more than worth it. I know we haven't really talked about the products we're developing, but they are, of course, a major outcome of the collaboration. And if you're interested in learning more about the Surfliner architecture, Alex, Tamsin, and Matt will be presenting on that in the next session, so please stick around. But so far, we've both successfully put our exhibits platform Starlight and our geospatial platform Shoreline into production at both campuses and have several additional products coming soon, a shared linked data authority platform named LARC, a staff-facing digital objects management platform called Comet, which is based on Hyrax, and a IIIF service, Orange Empire. And yes, these are all the names of historic California trains because we love our train analogies.
Let me be clear, Christy spends a lot of time looking up train names.
It's true. I also feel, though, that some of the more idealistic benefits of the collaboration have become a reality. Both UCSB and UCSD are in a similar situation. We both have significant legacy infrastructure, which requires maintenance and relatively small development teams. However, the collaboration has increased our capacity to innovate and make progress towards our next generation digital library platforms. When we are on work cycle, we effectively double our team size. And over time, as each of us is slowly able to replace portions of our legacy systems with Surfliner developed infrastructure, that capacity to innovate should hopefully increase. Knowledge sharing among the individuals on the team has had a major impact on our overall success. Neither campus has to be the expert in all of the things, but we are able to leverage those strengths that do exist. So for example, UCSB has more expertise in working with geospatial materials, so we took the lead on the geospatial product, whereas UCSD has a really strong ops unit, which UCSB has in turn benefited from. Beyond just sharing knowledge with each other, we're also learning new skills as part of the collaboration, which in turn has improved our local development practice. So our local teams have been able to apply this knowledge to improve our existing local infrastructure. We really have been able to build and leverage strengths and experiences of our campuses. And finally, while it's been admittedly difficult at times to balance our local work with our Surfliner work, even when we aren't working together, the lessons we learned and the practices we have developed have resulted in lasting cultural shifts for our teams. Speaking from the UCSB perspective, our development team enjoyed working in the Surfliner Agile framework so much that we adopted a similar framework for our local work when our new department was created. It also deeply affected our culture perspective on remote work, which was immensely helpful when COVID hit. For my team, transitioning to all of us working from home was pretty much business as usual, so much so that myself and Tamsin actually ended up collaborating with our local HR to give a series of information sessions to the other UCSB library staff on navigating the shift to remote work. So that's it for us. We hope that if you are considering collaborating with another institution, this has given you some insight on how to start and to sustain that collaboration. And hopefully we still have time for questions.
I don't know, time is a construct. What do you say, Ilke?
We still definitely have time for
Yay!
questions. I'm just checking, the question, but Q&A box. We don't have any in there. It has been a very, very lively chat that has been in the Slack channel. There's no specific question that I can read, but if there's anything that you want to just add up, please do. Okay. There's
Yes.
a question in the Slack, and let me just read it, for the recording, if you like. How long? Sorry, Anna is asking, do you all use the action items feature in Retrium?
Do we use the action items feature in Retrium? We would like to say yes. We definitely fill out the action items part in Retrium.
We are not always so great at leaving time to address those. However, I will say one of the things that I've noticed is even if we don't consciously go back as part of every retro, the times we do go back, we're often able to clear out some of those action items because we do, I think, really all listen to each other and really take those suggestions to heart.
There was another question that was, hold on, it was under Anna's question. Oh, how long are your retros? That's a great question, Trey. I know people who have retros that are hours and hours and hours long, and that sounds terrible, and I would hate to go to that retro. Our retro is, what is it, Chrissy, an hour?
It's 50 minutes.
50 minutes.
Yeah.
It's 50 minutes long.
We try to do the speedy meetings. So we, especially with remote work, ideally we're ending 10 minutes before the hour.
Yeah, I do think that having retros as a regular thing means that there's not like a buildup of things that need to come out in a retro. So 50 minutes seems to work pretty well for us.
Yeah, and this, I also think this is an area where Retrium has helped us, because for those of you who aren't familiar with it, there's a stage where you're able to both group and then vote. And then Retrium will present them in the order of things that get the most votes. And so generally, you'll hit a point where nobody voted that they wanted to talk about something, and that's kind of a natural place, especially if you're running low on time, to pause. It also helps you time box each discussion.
Yeah, for sure. I hope we're not stealing any thunder from Tamsin, Alex, and Matt. What if we are? There is another question that says, how often do we retro? We retro at the end of every sprint cycle, which is, our sprint cycles are 2 weeks.
Yeah, and to make things easy, we actually have set times that we try to hold all of our project-wide events when we're on sprint. So Tuesdays at 2 p.m. is retro time, and like demos are Tuesdays at 10:30. And so, that way everyone just knows when to expect it and can have it on their calendar in advance.
Brendan did some really great gatekeeping here. He asked what the term water cooler decision making is, which is a brilliant question. So water cooler decision making is like when you're talking in the hallways and you make a decision about a project. It happens all the time, very organically with teams. You can't have that happen if most of your team is at another location. So how did we identify it, and what do you do to move the decisions back into the team discussions? One of the things is making sure that the product owner and the team, the tech lead, were from different campuses. So then it can't happen in a hallway. And if we do end up having a discussion, which honestly didn't happen that often, that was not on Slack and was happening at a campus, we just moved it. We just made a decision based on what that information was. Like, was it something that needed to be brought up in a retro? Was it something that needed to be brought up in Slack? We do lots of swarms. Like, if there's a problem and we need to address it right away, we will say, like, hey, can people jump on and talk about this problem? And so that's how we do it.
Yeah, I think that the major thing in terms of the water cooler decision making, which comes from, I don't know if you mentioned this, Jessica, but it comes from like people standing around the water cooler having a conversation at work. And because especially at the beginning, there were some of us who were geographically in the same location and actually physically saw each other. We were concerned about that. That hasn't been so much a problem. A bigger problem has been private Slack conversations. And so that's the one thing where occasionally we all have to remind ourselves, like, oh, this is probably one that we need to have in the Surfliner channel, which I think is a little bit psychologically risky, or it feels a little psychologically risky at times, because our Surfliner channel is public within the UC Tech. So it's not private. We do have like 60 members in the channel, which is great. They're from, all over the UC campus, or all over the UC system, which is wonderful. But it's something that I think we had to train ourselves to be good about having that channel be very active and very noisy, and that was okay.
Yeah, the noise, I think a lot of times when we're in a Slack channel, we try to streamline it and like make it only about a certain topic. It was great. I feel like Tamsin was great about encouraging us to just make it a noisy channel and like just throw in stuff when it needs to be in there, because it does need to be transparent, and it actually helps with searching. It helps everybody be on the same page. It was a really good decision.
Yeah, and this is actually a really good point to call out. Jessica and I are the ones presenting about this, but these principles, how we work together, really were a collaborative effort with all of the team members. So those 30 people that we referenced in our by the number slides all each had a piece in making this really successful and making sure that we have a good collaborative culture.
Yeah, I mean, we're just managers taking credit like managers do. You're like a director, though. You're not even a manager. Ugh.
I see there's a question in the Q&A, which I will answer live. Do we adjust our sprint schedules over the calendar year, and in what ways? Yes. The answer to this is yes. A really great example is we are on sprint right now. And this is our last sprint of the work cycle. It was supposed to end today. I think it was supposed to end today, but we extended that. So we do try to be very conscious if there are things coming up that we know that all of the team members or a portion of team members will be impacted by, things like Thanksgiving week, or when we know spring break is coming and people may have children off from school. Sometimes we'll extend just one sprint and make it be 3 weeks. Other times we'll just sort of have a week off and then come back on sprint depending on how things sort of lay out. I mentioned that 2-week buffer period. The reason why we have a 2-week buffer period is partially so we have some flexibility on both ends of, do we need an extra 2 weeks on sprint for Surfliner? If yes, we haven't interrupted our local development schedules and vice versa. Ideally, that time is a time for the team to not be on sprint and be able to address things that maybe they haven't been able to while we're so active together. But yeah, we try to build in flexibility. We also try to schedule the work cycles out, at least date-wise, 2 cycles in advance. So we already have the dates on the calendar for our first work cycle in 2022. And we'll check in our monthly product owner and tech lead meeting and just confirm that those dates still work for everyone. So we definitely adjust things over time.
Thank you very much, Jessica, Christy, for a very moving presentation. I think we can now move on to our next set of speakers for the panel called Attestation, Building the Surfliner Architecture. Obviously, it's a continuation from the past speakers. I'll just stop sharing my camera. Over to you.
Okay, I think I've managed to unmute and I'm sharing my screen. Is that correct?
Yes, I can see the screen.
Okay, great. Yeah, hi, I'm Tamsin Johnson with UC Santa Barbara. I think my title is, what is my title? Associate Director for Digital Library Engineering. That's the right one. It changes sometimes. And then I have to extend my apologies to Matt and Alex, who I failed to wrangle for presentation prep. So I'm going to speak on behalf of the Surfliner team today as a whole, and particularly thank Matt and Alex for their continued contribution to the Surfliner architecture. I'd encourage either of you to chime in Q&A and provide additional perspective. Okay, so this is obviously, as Ilkay has said, an extension of the conversation that we've just been having. And I'm going to start out with some slides that look familiar. What's Project Surfliner? Project Surfliner is a collaborative project of the UC San Diego and UC Santa Barbara libraries to create our next generation digital library projects. Okay, is that the same exact phrase that Chrissy used? I think things are going to diverge quickly here, though, because what this presentation is about is really about our technology decisions, and specifically it's about how those technology decisions relate to our focus on collaboration. So when we started Project Surfliner, we did have some initial ideas about how our technologies might look. There's an early slide from an internal meeting that I think Tim Marconi put together that says we definitely might use, and had a list of familiar Samvera technology. And indeed, it's strategic for us to work with the Samvera community. But one thing that's really central to the Surfliner ethos is the collaboration between the campuses. So our goal is largely to extend our team capacity by working together, and to have that make it possible for us to really successfully pursue our ambitions towards having leading edge digital library infrastructure. And our technology decisions are made with that context in place. So what I want to talk about here is how that collaboration first approach has shaped our architecture. We'll encounter some of the Surfliner products in the course of this talk. Starlight and Lark were a couple of our first products that we focused our first sprints on. You'll see familiar technologies throughout. Starlight's a Spotlight app backed by Solar in the usual way. Lark is a homegrown authority and vocabulary management system built with Valkyrie, and notably not Rails, but Sinatra over Postgres and with a thin front end. We'll come back to that. We'll spend less time with Shoreline and Orange Empire, but Orange Empire is sort of our gloss over the idea of having IIIF services maintained in a shared way using shared infrastructure. There's not a lot of code development that goes into that, with the exception of the infrastructure as code aspect. And then there's Shoreline, which focuses on geospatial discovery. That's a Geo Blacklight product with GeoServer and Solar and the usual Blacklight stuff. Okay, and then last but not least, we've just this year come around to focusing development on the sort of core object management aspect of our project. So the staff-facing object management system is the sort of mouthful of a phrase that we use for this. That is based on Hyrax, notably running on Valkyrie and not using the Wings adapter. So there's no Fedora in this stack, but instead Postgres and S3 via Valkyrie and Shrine, and also a little Fog AWS and what have you. Okay, and here is a sketch of our broad architecture. This slide's going to come back up again, so don't worry too much about taking it in now. But I did want to give you a sort of moment to look at the brief overview before we dig in. Okay, so Surfliner is really shaped by architectural commitments that are focused on making it possible for us to continue to work together as a cross-campus collaboration. And I'm going to go over really 4 of those in particular, and sort of weave in a little bit of how they impact our practices and how they've impacted individual product decisions. First of all, building from the last talk, we have a really heavy focus on iterative planning and development. Somebody asked in the Q&A whether we adjust our sprint schedule. We do, in fact. It's usually a sort of 1 quarterly work cycle where we spend about half of our time working on Surfliner stuff, and then the individual campuses have to break to go take care of our homework. Our long-term goal is really to be able to slowly replace the individual campuses' internal needs with Surfliner products, so that when we're off cycle, we're still working on Surfliner. But in practice so far, what it's looked like is that when we break, we all have things to catch up on to keep the wheels turning at home. And what that means is that it's really important for us to be able to get appreciable work done in that time. So a lot of our decisions are focused on how do we keep ourselves on a path to delivery. Thank you for sharing the diagram in chat, Chrissy. If people look at the Slack channel, they can look at the diagram while we have slides. Okay, so what we really focus on first and foremost in keeping this iterative planning and development alive is building out the trail markers for the whole path before we lay down the rails. So we've used the metaphor laying down the tracks in talk titles in the past. And for me, it refers to both our focus on the collaborative practices. So laying down the tracks means deciding how we're going to work together before we move the train. But it also means building out the infrastructure, right? The tracks are the infrastructure in this metaphor. So before we lay them down, we have to mark the path, and the way that we do that with our technical decisions is really formative for us. So there's a couple of ways. I'll start at the macro level and then do the micro. We lay down the rails in the way that, or we lay down the trail markers in the way that we choose our products and dependencies. So in our very early days, we chose specifically to work on projects that we knew that we could ship. And part of this is about practicing things that we know that we're not doing well already. So when we started the collaboration, both campuses sort of had a history of being able to do a lot of development work, but not of converting that into production. So the trail markers are in part about, we want to know that the reason we're deciding to be in production or not is not because of technical barriers, but due to product decision making. So our early products were things that we had a pretty good handle on. Starlight as a Spotlight app was not overly complex, and Lark, which we'll dig into again in just a moment, is a really simple app that gave us a lot of leeway to work on our operational needs. So we were able to build out some of the IT ops infrastructure that we'll encounter later as part of the Lark project. And then in general, you'll note that we're building from existing infrastructure wherever we can. So that looks like Samvera, Blacklight, Valkyrie, DryRV gems. Like we make those choices. With collaboration with this community in mind. And then likewise, we also choose our dependencies, our system dependencies and our backing services are these things that we're familiar with? Are we working with things that we have support from the community on? And again, for us, this is really about building those trail markers right away at the beginning of the project. Looking more, I should have changed slides some time ago. Looking more at CI, looking more at the micro level, we do CI/CD. So one of the first things we do when we start a project is we build the continuous integration pipeline and we build the deployment to production into that pipeline. At first, we were kind of hedging our bets and being like, oh, well, maybe we'll do a push button prod deploy. But in reality, we felt like what we really wanted to do was get those products into production and exercise the deployment aspects of our work every time we commit. we do use cloud native infrastructure to make this possible, and there'll be a lot more about that in just a moment. And then our development processes are highly influenced by 12-factor, probably in a way that's not even visible to every one of our developers. Some of the 12-factor factors, you can find 12-factor at 12factor.net. Some of the 12-factor factors feel obvious, but some of them are actually really important. Two that are important for the CI/CD that were actually big shifts for our team were storing the config in the environment. So we want to vary our deployments by environment config and not by code changes, and dev prod parity. So we test the artifact that we deploy, we develop on that same artifact, and what that looks like for us is a container build that we roll out into Kubernetes. And we really want to know that we're working as closely with the same thing throughout our life cycle, so that we're testing that. This is a very nice green example of our pipelines. They're not always this green looking. Oh, and this is old. It says master. We changed that a long time ago. Okay. Second architectural point. Small services fit for purpose. So we really are using Blacklight and Hyrax and so on with an eye towards carving out their functionality into specifically defined functional areas. And our goal is really to keep our development focus tight and keep the dependencies between the products loose. So we do want individual campuses to be able to go live with one product or another independently of the others. And we also want new potential collaborators to be able to join without having to take on the whole architectural stack together. So we try and be articulate about the functional areas that individual products are working with, and we try to drive development from user requirements. That's been important on Shoreline and Comet in particular, but in the ways that that Chrissy and Jessica have touched on, we do have a nice relationship between the product side and the technical team. The most notable place where we draw a really hard line between functional areas is that we really separate management from discovery. So Starlight and Shoreline are really discovery-focused platforms. Comet and Lark are really management-focused platforms. And we want those things to be well separated so that we're not in a place where we have to make changes to user-facing functionality on the basis of an internal need or pressure. Okay, so an example of this is, an example of the maintaining clear application boundaries is the Lark project, which is sort of split itself into a API. So this is a really small, simple REST application serving out JSON LD. The modeling's done in SCOS. There's some background tasks for authority reconciliation and other kinds of background management tasks, and it's built with Valkyrie and Sinatra. And then only with that development in place did we start to think about what the front end might look like. So we did an initial spike with Vue.js and then ended up sort of leaving that behind and starting work on a Rails based thin front end with like no database backing. It's just a thin front end for the API. So that starts to feel like a little microservice-y, but most of our applications are not very microservice-y, despite our efforts to keep them loosely coupled. So Comet's big and mixes a bunch of functional areas, in part because we really wanted to adopt Hyrax in the fact that it's like the goal. Sorry, I'm distracted a little by the chat. The goal for adopting Hyrax was to meet a large number of our gathered use cases all at once. We did a big analysis and like checked off a bunch of items. This one's Hyrax, this one's Hyrax, this one's Hyrax. We can make Hyrax do this easy. And that exercise was really compelling and made us feel like we were in good hands working with this community. But Comet, to answer the QA question already, is kind of a different Hyrax application. Its storage is in S3 for the file storage. The metadata is all in Postgres, and it really took us a lot of preparation to be ready to do that. Yeah, so that's Comet. The Comet development scope feels like pretty big to us, and it's possible that what we'll do is extract bits out in the future. If there's time, I can get into that a little bit. Okay, principle number 3. We're really under pressure to be multi-cloud and multi-campus. So each campus has different infrastructure pressures. UCSB is under mandate to move as much of our workloads as possible to AWS. UCSD actually does have quite a bit of on-prem computing resources and has a desire to keep to use those rather than bill out more workloads to AWS. And similarly, the storage needs are split where the UCSD team would really like to keep the storage on-prem. The UCSB team again wants to keep it off. So the way that we address that is by building our applications cloud native for Kubernetes and deploying them there as a practice. And UCSB is using a managed Kubernetes system with in AWS. That's EKS. We'd be happy to talk with folks about how the management of that is going. UCSD actually has 2 separate clusters on-prem, one where they deploy production workloads and one where they deploy sort of staging and review applications. So the CB is targeting that. We do try to develop our new products for the cloud specifically. This is more 12 factors. And where we are using existing dependencies, we're trying to push them towards cloud nativity. So an example of that is opening Hyrax up to statelessness. So the little internal storage in the diagram, just this like shared storage towards the bottom left is a place where Hyrax storage state that's shared between the web app and the asynchronous workers. And we're really worried about that. So we've been working on having less of that in Hyrax. We haven't always had good luck moving our application, our dependencies towards cloud nativity. And that's always a conversation with the upstream maintainers. But we do try to keep our work focused on the sustainability of our dependencies. And some of these 12 factors start to look pretty pretty like expected normal development processes, but we are a little bit focused on the disposability of the workloads, fast startup, graceful shutdown, and running them as independent processes. Multi-cloud does present a challenge in that using managed services is really hard. UCSB sometimes would like to just use something like an S3, and part of the selection for that has to be that that we're able to deploy that into a Kubernetes cluster. So we need the application to be configurable to run in either campus's environment. On the plus side, that insulates both campuses from lock-in. And our last principle, which I'll rush through a little bit because I'm tight on time, is always be architecting. So we are trying to adapt as we go. Those trail markers, our path to the infrastructure that we want to build, but we're always looking for places where we can make changes that make things more sustainable for us and that look towards our future scope. So you can see some places in this diagram where we have called out expected future scope. We know that we want to see content moving really seamlessly between the backend management services and the front ends. So we've started to sketch out what that might look like in the event broker and metadata API. This is an example. The event broker in particular is an example of where we, to answer Trey's question, is an example of where that multi-cloud issue is really tricky. Because on the one hand, we could use AWS's out-of-the-box queuing system, and we feel like that would work really well straightforwardly, but we really can't do that and keep our multi-cloud commitments. So that's sort of a decision to be made, where if we didn't have that commitment, we could have maybe just made it tentatively and moved and rolled forward later. And then likewise, I've actually been super interested to hear other people talking about the need for preservation. Trey says we shouldn't use RabbitMQ. I've been interested to hear people talking about the need for preservation integration. I'll remind folks that there was a grant that worked on this back under the DuraSpace auspices called One-to-Many. And we think we might implement something like the Preservation Gateway API that was defined as part of that grant. This is going to be a focus for us definitely in the late winter or early spring. I think I only just have a few minutes for questions, but I do want to open up the floor.
I think we still have time for you, Tamsin, but there is one question, additional question from Jonathan. I'm not sure whether you covered it, if you've seen it in the Q&A.
Is that Jonathan's? Yeah. So
yeah.
So yeah, Jonathan, in general, where we're using Valkyrie, we're using Postgres for the metadata store on that. And that's not necessarily a long-term commitment, but that's the way that we've rolled both the Lark configuration and really, I think really notably in some fanfare is that Comet is in fact a Hyrax app that uses Postgres for metadata. It is definitely advanced Hyrax usage at present, but it's definitely also possible if you are willing to have your hands in the Hyrax code base. And a lot of our work towards making that work is a lot of work, our work towards making that possible is happening in the Hyrax code base. So Comet's currently pointing at Hyrax main and updating a couple of times a week. Some people are typing. I'm on the edge of my seat.
As we have time, so we can. Okay.
Anna wants to know how the Starlight app knows which manifest to pull from Comet. Good question. I think that's a question that we'll be asking in earnest over the winter. Quite possibly, it's some kind of queuing or pub sub approach, and we have sort of been working internal pub sub into Hyrax in with the specific goal of being able to publish things like publish events for things like index updates, and that's increasingly baked into Hyrax. But how exactly we'll do that integration is definitely an example of always be architecting. I'm interested in the chat about RabbitMQ maintenance here.
Right. I don't see any particular question, but yeah, that's definitely going on.
Was I actually fast, okay? I thought I was pushing the time.
No, I think on our program, yeah, you had the time until 40 past, so that's why I'm just taking it a little bit slowly. Was there anything else that you would like to pick up from the Slack channel and make any other comments, or just you let me know when to?
Yeah, I'm gonna use my a last soapbox moment to say we're super excited about running Hyrax on Valkyrie as a Valkyrie native application. We think that's really cool, and we hope that other people will join us in working on that. Like it is not done. But if you want to have a bunch of fun hacking on almost 10-year-old code base, you can join us working on opening Hyrax up to that. Trey is asking where Comet doesn't use Valkyrie. I think I may have been, if I said Comet doesn't use Valkyrie in some places, then I may have misspoken. We're not using Valkyrie for everything. Like there is still active record stuff in Hyrax for the various database bits, but where we're writing repository objects, we're doing that with Valkyrie. Hyrax still struggles a little bit with that around collections, although that's rapidly changing thanks both to our work and Lynette's, which have been sort of happening in parallel. And I think there's some places where the file management is a little fussy, the versioning isn't very robust, and I think that's still like a Valkyrie question in general. And like how do we get adapters that have the same versioning semantics for files? But yeah, there are no places where Comet is doing what you think of as Hyrax's repository functions where it's not using Valkyrie. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much, Thompson. This was a great, very informative talk. We had lots of engagement in the Slack. So we're coming to the last session of the last talk of the day. That is from Avalon, IFFF player transcript support, and John will take over with the Nanshi. I suppose we also have, I'm sorry, I'm just checking my, right. There's also a poster session, so we will use share that URL separately in the Slack. Heather is just reminding me.
Yeah, that's correct. We'll put the link in the Slack if it's not already there.
Okay. Will you go ahead, John, here or?
Yeah, all right. I will end the webinar for today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.